On behalf of Microsoft and all our partners today, I'd like to welcome you to DevCast. DevCast is Microsoft's live quarterly satellite broadcast targeted at helping developers use Microsoft technology to build successful business solutions. My name's Jeff Teeper, and I'm going to be your co-host today. And joining me, I'm very pleased to have someone who at the end of the last DevCast in August absolutely committed to show us some more Visual Basic for Applications technology today, and that's Tom Button. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Jeff. I guess I should have learned from my previous commitments on television that these are the kinds of things that don't get forgotten. So in fact, today I'm very happy to say that we do have finished Visual Basic for Applications ready to show you in great detail.
We very much look forward to that. And before we go back to Tom and talk about some of the technology, I thought I'd give you some background on DevCast. And first, I'd very much like to thank everybody for coming today and giving us some of your valuable time. We hope you'll learn a lot today that's very applicable to your jobs and your business solutions. We have over 26,000 people joining us today in over 820 sites around the world, every place throughout North America, United States, Mexico, and Canada, but also throughout Europe, every place from Dublin, Ireland to Istanbul, Turkey. Excuse me, and I'd very much like to thank a lot of the people who are involved in putting on this production, particularly the European Satellite Company for helping us with their Astra facilities, the Jones Computer Network here in the United States, a lot of the large companies such as Ford who helped us with their facilities and use this as an internal training tool. And we very much appreciate the time and resources you've given for this broadcast. So what I thought I'd do is talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish with DevCast. The idea is that we're going to explain some development concepts and talk about how to use our products and development tools to build solutions. The approach we're going to take is very much a learn-by-example approach. Today we're going to take a business solution with 6 or 7 core modules and build it piece by piece. And through learning by example, we hope you can apply it to your own solutions. The other idea about doing these types of broadcasts is that we can get you the absolute latest information direct from the experts at Microsoft. In fact, today we've got about 7 or 8 product and program managers joining us, talking to you about the technologies they're personally working on. But DevCast is also very much a joint learning opportunity. We encourage you in all the mechanisms you have for feedback, the feedback forms in your attendee kits. If you're on a Microsoft site, and you can talk to representatives there. We're going to have some time for Q&A. You can reach us at devcast@microsoft.com on the internet, or in the DevCast forum up on CompuServe. We really appreciate for you to give us a lot of feedback on how we can make DevCast better. Since the previous 2 DevCasts, we've personally looked at thousands of response forms on ideas developers wanted us to use in this format so they could understand our technology better and how to use it. Let me talk about some of the materials you've gotten. You'll see them up on the slide in your attendee handout kit that most of you should have received. And if you didn't get one directly, this is also available on the DevCast forum on CompuServe, and we'll tell you a little bit later how to order them. In the attendee kit, you'll see a diskette that I've shown up here on the screen, and let's actually switch over to the monitor so we can take a look at what the attendee diskette gives you. When you run this on your system, it'll set up a program group in the program manager that will give you this customer information workbench, which is all the source code of the application we're going to be showing you today, as well as technical white papers on the Microsoft Office and some of the Visual Basic for Application and object linking and embedding technology we're going to be showing you throughout the program. So you can get a lot more detail on the technology we're going to be showing you. Also in your packet, you have a roadmap that covers in great detail the design and development and key code fragments that we're going to use in the solution we're going to build today, some product literature on the Microsoft Office and some of the development tools such as Visual C++, and how to order any of the DevCast information either from this event or from previous DevCasts, the first one focusing on client-server, or the last one we did which focused on workgroup computing. So what I'm going to do now is basically summarize what we're trying to do, which is help you build successful business solutions more easily than ever possible before. And we're going to show you how to do that today, but before we show you how to build the completed solution step by step, I'm going to have Tom demonstrate the solution for us. Tom, would you please do that for us?
Sure, I'm happy to. What we have here is an application that's built primarily using Microsoft Excel 5.0. This is an application that we're calling our Customer Information Workbench. It has 6 major modules that would map roughly onto some of the tasks that a product marketing or a sales and marketing manager might need to do in the course of their day-to-day work. 6 major modules you get to through this series of 6 buttons that I have on the right. Let's look at the sales analysis application first. What I have, you can see I have a highly graphical user interface, which is actually comprised partially of an OLE embedded object that we created with Visio, one of the new OLE 2.0 supporting applications. I can click on any one of my regions, major regions, and up will come all of this sales data that I have for this past fiscal year. I can go back and I can select any one of many different regions, and it will automatically bring up the data from a SQL server that I'm getting access through ODBC using the Microsoft Query tool and populating our pivot table. But the region I'm specifically interested in right now is the Pacific Rim. I go out to my Pacific Rim data. I actually don't want to look at it cut by quarter against product category. I'd like to take a two-dimensional slice of this data that actually shows category against country. So I can see, for instance, how my meat and poultry sales are doing in all of the various countries as a percentage of overall revenue for that particular country. In this case, I'd like to look at it in dollars as well, so I can see the relative size of these markets. You can see that Hong Kong is a very good market for us. Singapore is also fairly good, but we still have some work to do in Japan. I'd like to go back, and now one of the other activities that I might do as a product marketing manager or a sales and marketing manager is work on my annual budgets and plans. What I have here is for the Pacific Rim, or I can pick any other region. But for the Pacific Rim, it shows me on the blue bars, it will actually show me last year's actuals against next year's forecast. And it looks like my meat and poultry sales are something that looks like they could use a little bit of a boost as a down category. I'm going to go out to the actual data set, which is driving that particular graph. I want to drill in. This is actually showing the outlining feature of Microsoft Excel. I'm going to expand my Pacific Rim region to show each of the different product categories. And you can see that my forecasts here show only about $3.3 million in business. If I wanted to do incremental changes, I could expand my vertical column so that I can show what my last year's actuals were and what my forecast growth rate is based on the growth rate of that region, and I could manage those incrementally. Or as I'm going to do now, I'd actually like to make some radical changes so that I can substantially increase my meat and poultry sales in that market next year. So I'm going to make this about 1.5, well, no, I'm not going to do my product launch until second quarter, so that one's going to be a little bit more conservative. Then I'm going to have substantially increased sales, about $1.2 million here. And then I'm probably going to top out at around $1.8 million. So you can see that brings my forecast up substantially. Some of the other activities I might do as a product marketing manager would include creating any one of many different types of reports, ranging from customer letters to event plans, intra-office memos, monthly product reports that I need to submit to my own management, quarterly strategy. Let's go ahead and create a customer letter. I click on my Go button, it'll bring me up a list of any one of the many different types of, many of the different people in my own personal Rolodex that I might send to. And I can either select a custom list, so if I wanted to send a letter out to anybody who's placed a very large order last year, I could do that. But in this case, I just want to send a letter to Anthony's Beer and Ale. Click OK, and this is actually going out and using OLE automation. It's launching Microsoft Word 6.0 and driving Word to implement its mail merge feature, inserting information about this particular customer into my preformed customer letter document template. So here's my ready-to-go letter, and if I wanted to, I could come in and edit and add some specific information. In this case, I'll be seeing this customer. Forward to seeing you in Cairo next year. And if I was ready to, if I was happy with my letter, I could pull it down and print it and send off hard copy. Or if I had his electronic address, I could simply send it to him via email. In this case, I'm just going to exit and go back to my Customer Information Workbench. So that's my reporting feature. I have several other modules. I have a communications module that would make it easy for me to pick any one of the many different people I need to work with on a day-to-day basis, pick them out of my Rolodex, ranging from customers to suppliers. You can see I can scroll down or page down. This actual database is maintained locally in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. Once I have my particular customer card up that I'd like to talk to, I can actually, using the new WOSA API, the new Windows Open Services API for telephony, I can actually hook this up using VBA to talk to Tappy and actually dial the phone for myself. This is dialing my friend Cornelius, who's a customer at the Always Open Quick Mart. Always Open Quick Mart? Hi, Cornelius. I was wondering, how's your Outback Lager inventory doing these days?
Well, actually, it's flying off the shelves.
Well, would you like to place a reorder?
Well, obviously, that depends on the price.
Well, I think we can probably cut you a pretty good deal.
Okay, well,
why don't you talk to my sales manager? I'll have him call you.
Okay, I'll wait for the call.
Thanks.
Bye.
So anyway, this is another type of service that you can implement using VBA, talking to the various WOSA services. I'm going to hang up my dialer. Oops. Let's go back to our main menu. And I have another module here for managing my inventory. This inventory sheet is actually a section of an Excel worksheet that's talking to an AS400 mainframe through wall data Rumba, and it can show me current status on many of the different items that I keep in inventory, as well as recommended reorders. And in this case, I can actually double-click on my order column to toggle whether I have an open order, and I can turn that order back on. And in this case, looks like I might need to order some more of the Steel Eye Stout. And if I wanted to, I could ask my worksheet to compute the recommended quantity. And so I have VBA code that actually uses an algorithm to figure out exactly how much I should order. Then if I wanted to, I could click on process orders, where it would generate hard copy document automatically or route my order to my vendor electronically via email. The last module that I have is one that I use to help me manage my various marketing programs. This is a section of my Excel worksheet that actually is integrated with Microsoft Project using VBA to talk to Microsoft Project through Ole Automation. You can see that I have start date and end dates for various quarterly marketing programs, expected costs along this line, and then the expected outcome, the results in terms of revenue. And I have this plotted graphically down here with the blue bars representing my expected marketing expenditure, my red bars, my resulting revenue. And as you can see, my second quarter launches, we actually have some pretty aggressive expected results. And hopefully, if the marketing plans work, then my sales, my marketing costs as a percentage of revenue drop down to a long-term sustainable level, as indicated by my yellow line. So these are just some of the activities which can be integrated very nicely using a combination of productivity applications with the types of services that you'd normally expect to find in any large enterprise, ranging from large-scale remote data access to enterprise messaging services to telephony, integrating this seamlessly with your productivity applications to give you a truly integrated desktop for your information workers. So, Jeff, why don't we talk a little bit about how we would actually build a solution like this?
Great, Tom. Thanks. Well, that was kind of a whirlwind tour of this application that we're going to build today, and we'll go through it in a lot more depth and actually what was the code behind a lot of the things that Tom showed you. The key concept that we're going to try to get across today is the idea of component-based development, that you can buy off-the-shelf high-quality components or build them internally for greater reuse and assemble them into a custom solution. What this does is that you can leverage the vast amount of software that's out there in the industry, either shrink-wrapped or third-party developed or internally developed, and develop solutions at much less cost than ever before possible. And also, through this component-based development process, through a very standard way, you can get it all the enterprise services you need for a custom solution. The type of application that Tom just showed us is very, very powerful, but it's only possible if we can truly integrate the various project management and sales data and inventory data that are probably in many different systems in your organization. So we need a component-based architecture for integrating that data very easily. And so let me switch and talk about some of the benefits of component-based development. First, increase quality. By relying on high-quality off-the-shelf or internally developed components, you can enhance the overall quality of your solution. You don't have to worry about crafting robust communications modules and all the details that are needed for error handling and network traffic and security if you can buy some high quality component and include it in your solution. So it's much easier to incorporate some of the robustness features that you might want. This also will reduce dramatically the development cycle for your applications and the fabled application backlog that many companies are seeing. This will, by reducing the cost of development, essentially by cutting back the amount of new code that you need to use and need to develop in your solution, you can do it with less time and less money, and this will lead to great improved satisfaction on your end users' parts and on the business units that you support. And lastly, by architecting your solution around a component-based architecture, this will dramatically improve the maintainability of the system. You can plug and play different modules to enhance the system, to change different back-end services or add new features for users. So increasingly development is not done in one cycle and then is completed. More and more as business dynamics are pushing on the technology groups and companies, you need to enhance the system, so that makes the value of a component-based architecture even greater. And so let me talk about some of the requirements for realizing the benefits of a component-based architecture. None of this is new, right? We've been talking about COBOL and Fortran subroutines for decades. Where's really the news behind all this? Well, the news is that we can use a industry standard object model for buying and building components that leverages this massive investment the software industry is making. And these objects can be highly programmable and customizable. You never before had end users say, well, gee, I'd like a spreadsheet package that supported COBOL subroutines. But through an industry standard object model, you can leverage the end user demand and build upon it for the benefit of the developer. The other barrier to doing this kind of component-based development is a common programming language. Lots of people have been trying to build the types of solutions that Tom just showed you, but they ran into walls or learning curves as they wanted to integrate multiple products into their solution, or they wanted to use a new macro language. Well, by having a common professional development environment consistent between applications, it reduces the amount of time that a developer needs to spend to learn and incorporate a new module or new object or new host application in their solution. We're also going to talk today about how to build your own custom components. Clearly, in a component-based architecture, you need a very easy way to build your own custom components as well as incorporating them in your solution. And lastly, and this is really what DevCast is about, is making sure you have all the latest products and information on how to use this technology. Microsoft is making, along with our partners, a very large investment in things like DevCast to get this information out to you. So that's basically the requirements. I'd like to hand it back to Tom to talk about what Microsoft is doing to meet these requirements for developers.
Thanks, Jeff. We have many new, highly exciting technologies that started shipping just this year to make it much easier for you to build highly integrated desktops for your employees. Object Linking and Embedding 2.0 was a great new technology that first started shipping in May of this year that makes it easy not only to visually integrate from a productivity application perspective many different components supplied by different applications, but also through the OLE automation interface makes it very easy for programmers to orchestrate the interoperability between various application supplied components, unlike could ever be done before. Microsoft Office 4.0 you can think of as Microsoft's latest and greatest collection of programmable objects that can be combined using these programmatic techniques that we'll be demonstrating to build highly integrated desktop solutions. Visual Basic for Applications, Microsoft has been talking about for many years now the whole concept of its common macro language vision. And in fact, this year Microsoft has begun shipping the newest version of Microsoft's common macro language, the Visual Basic for Applications core technology. Through the Windows Open Services architecture, Microsoft makes it possible to have fully plug-and-play pieces that operate on the client side, taking advantage of many different suppliers of services on a service using the service provider interfaces. Such technologies as MAPI make it easy for us to integrate any different type of of messaging driver with any different type of messaging client, using TAPI for telephony, and ODBC for open database connectivity, for open database access. All of these technologies are designed to make it easy for you to create solutions using plug-and-play components. And lastly, Visual C++ 1.5 is an exciting new version of our Visual C++ compiler that for the first time makes it very easy for you to create fully functional OLE 2.0 components that take full advantage of all of the OLE 2.0 features, ranging from menu negotiation, toolbar negotiation, all the way through the fully programmatic OLE automation interface. All of these technologies combined are designed to make it much easier for you to build the types of custom solutions that will make your clients or your end users far more productive on their day-to-day activities.
Thanks, Tom. We're going to go into all those technologies in quite a bit of detail in just a little bit. But what I thought I'd do now is summarize the agenda for today. First, Microsoft has often gotten feedback that we do these great developer demos, but then we say things like, well, VBA controlled an object through OLE automation and talk to data via ODBC and route it around via MAPI, and people say, huh? So what we thought we'd do is start by a very basic overview of the key technologies that Tom talked about: object linking and embedding, Visual Basic for applications, and the Windows Open Services architecture. So that's what we're going to do next. Then we're going to step through building the 6 or 7 modules that Tom showed you, step by step, and have product managers from each of the groups come up and build their piece and show you the code that was involved. We're going to stop at a couple of points for live Q&A, and we'll put the numbers up on the screen on how to do that. And after the second phase of building the solution, we're going to have some very exciting news. As Tom mentioned, Visual C++ is a major innovation on Microsoft's part to make it easier to both use and build custom components. And we're very pleased to launch Visual C++ 1.5 and give you a very exciting demonstration of its object and database features here today. As well as we'll also follow up by showing you latest addition to the Microsoft Developer Network and some of the new features we've added to make it easier for you to get access to all the developer kits and technical information. So we're going to be demonstrating that. And then after the final Q&A component, we're very pleased to have a sneak preview of some coming technology our Access group is working on. Just as we got Tom on the hook with the last DevCast to show us VBA, this time we're going to have our Access group come up and show us some technology they're working on, specifically some of the developer features. And we're going to bring them back for the next DevCast, DevCast 4, which we're planning on March 30th to be held at the Tech Ed in the United States in New Orleans on March 30th, which will focus on databases, including Access and SQL Server and FoxPro. So with that agenda, what I'd like to do is hand it back to our friend who's probably finished that Outback Lager by now, and that's Cornelius Willis, who's going to demonstrate and talk about the basic concepts of object linking and embedding 2.0. Cornelius?
Thanks, Jeff. OLE 2.0 is Microsoft's first step at taking Windows from a function or API-oriented system to a true object-oriented system. As you can see from the slide on OLE 2, it's a very extensive implementation. There are a number of features or interfaces supported. It's important to note, however, that OLE 2 is not an all-or-nothing proposition. A developer doesn't have to support the entire interface and can support pieces of it without supporting the entire implementation. It's also important to note that not only does OLE 2 enable the kind of component-based development that we're going to talk about extensively today, it's also an enabler for compound document creation and editing. And we think this is the part of the feature set that will really drive its adoption by end users. The end result being more objects for developers to use, more tightly integrated for end users. I've got a short demonstration here that shows off some of these compound document features. Most of us now are familiar with OLE 1.0, which allows us to edit objects in their containers. For example, here I can edit this bitmap that's inside this document in Word. I'll go and color this anchor and then update the object and close the editor. With OLE 2.0, we've introduced the concept of visual editing, whereby we can edit an object inside its container. For example, when I double-click on this embedded Excel object, I get Excel's menu bars and toolbars. And if I come back, I'm back in Word. I can also actually edit the cells in the worksheet. For example, here I will, instead of forecasting 130% growth for 1994, I'll forecast, actually let's get back here, I'll forecast 150% growth. And then I can drag that into another cell. Another feature that's supported for the creation of compound documents is cross-application or cross-process drag and drop. For example, I can take this chart out of Excel and simply drop it. There we go. Simply drop it into that Word document. And it's as simple as that. Now let's talk about OLE 2 automation. As you can see from the slide on OLE 2 automation, there we go. OLE 2 automation is a way for OLE 2 controllers to talk to OLE 2 objects. The important thing to understand about OLE 2 is that it doesn't matter who creates the controller, who creates the objects. It's completely open specification. Anybody can build controllers, anybody can build objects. I've got a short demonstration here that I want to show you using Visual Basic 3.0. Controlling a document in Visio. If we could go to the demonstration for a minute, that would be great. There we go. What I've done here, I've got a Visual Basic form that selects a color to color the shapes in a Visio document. And if I hit the button here, color it, I go into my Visual Basic code, and I've set a breakpoint here so we can watch the code execute while we actually change the colors in the Visio document. I'm going to step through the Visual Basic code, and you can see what we've done here is we've got this collection of shapes in Visio in the current page object, and there's a count property that indicates the number of objects in that document. And as I step through here, I'm setting the fill style property to this variable, the color, which I've set with these option buttons in Visual Basic. And I continue to step through, and as you can see, we are changing the color of each object in the Visio document to red. And this is really the backbone of the kinds of solutions we'll be showing you today, this OLE 2 automation interface and this ability to control objects that are found in other applications. And the other really exciting thing that we'll be showing you today is how to create OLE objects, how to create OLE-enabled applications very easily using Visual C++ 1.5. And now back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Cornelius. So you saw the core object technology, Object Linking Embedding 2.0, and Cornelius showed you a little bit about how to control it using Visual Basic 3.0. What we'd like to do now is bring up Randy Kath, who's going to talk to us more about Visual Basic for applications and what that is. Randy?
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Randy Kath. I'm a product manager with Microsoft's Applications Programmability Business Unit. I'm going to spend the next several minutes talking about Visual Basic for applications, the latest Visual Basic technology from Microsoft incorporated into the Office applications. Visual Basic for applications, like Visual Basic, is an OLE automation controller, allowing you to control the objects of Microsoft's Office applications, as well as objects of other third-party applications, and objects that you might build in-house using tools like Visual C++. Visual Basic for applications will be available first in Microsoft Excel in the next 3 weeks of this year, and soon after that in Microsoft Project, which will be available by first quarter of 1994. Visual Basic for applications in its robust development environment, combined with the Office objects in the Microsoft Office, provides you the fastest way to build custom solutions available today. And what Visual Basic is, what Visual Basic for applications is Visual Basic. It's based on the same core language technology. It supports the same data structures, arrays, and variant data types as Visual Basic. It consists of the same object manipulation constructs, including objects that expose methods and properties for programmability. And it includes the ability to create functions and procedures that have optional parameters associated with them. Also, because Visual Basic for applications is localized with the applications, it will be available in several different languages. For example, Excel will be available in 21 different languages. Included with that will be Visual Basic for applications. Visual Basic for applications also includes the advanced debugging features found in Visual Basic and advanced editing features. And finally, Visual Basic for Applications allows you to take advantage of the objects, constructs, and macros that applications have already provided for you and that you're already familiar with. What I'd like to do now is spend a few minutes showing you how Visual Basic for Applications is integrated into Microsoft Excel version 5, soon to be shipped. So we start here in Excel 5 with a worksheet. To write a macro in Excel 5, we simply click our right mouse button on the Sheet tab and insert a new module. This brings us into the Visual Basic for Applications development environment. Those of you familiar with Visual Basic should recognize this to be just as you've seen in the Visual Basic standalone product. Now here I can write comments such as Visual Basic rules, and I can start a macro called VBA in this case. And we'll just begin by dimensioning a string, then assigning that string a value. We'll set it equal to the infamous hello world. And then finally, display that string using a message box and end our subroutine. Now in Visual Basic for Applications, should look very familiar to you. You have the same color-coded language syntax statements. You have green comments, blue keywords, and as well you can set breakpoints and use and watch variables immediately in this debug environment. So let me choose to set a breakpoint here, and I'll double-click on my variable str and add an instant watch variable. Also, you can test your Visual Basic for Applications macro right here in the environment just by clicking on the Run button. As you can see, it's executed up to the breakpoint. And if we switch to our Watch tab on our dialog box, we can see the value of our str variable, which is now set to null. By simply stepping into our code, we see that this variable gets set to the value hello world. Stepping again displays our dialog, our message box. So now let's remove this breakpoint and show how this integrates into the Excel application. By clicking again now on Sheet 1, returns us back to our worksheet. I can then choose to just simply draw a button using the drawing button or the drawing controls toolbar in Microsoft Excel and create this button right on top of our worksheet. This immediately allows us to assign the macro to the button, and then I can rename this button right here on top of the worksheet. Now by simply clicking on the button, I'm able to execute that macro right here in the Excel environment. Now what I'd like to do is show you one other way in which Visual Basic for Applications macro are more tightly integrated into the Excel paradigm. So switching back to the module, let's write one more macro. This one we're going to use to calculate the area of a circle. And we'll do this using a function in Visual Basic for Applications. We'll just call it area. And we'll pass it one argument, the radius of the circle. Now, as you know, to calculate the area of a circle, you need to know the value of pi. So let's define a global constant pi up here, the top of our module. And now return back to our function. And to complete it, we simply assign the area equal to the value of 2 times pi times the radius squared. Then end our function. Now if we return back to Sheet 1 and simply add some data into our spreadsheet cells, excuse me, and I'll enter 5 and 10, and let's use the feature in Excel to continue this series of numbers. And finally then, to compute the area of these cells, given that these are the radius for these different values, we'll simply type in the familiar Excel paradigm of area. Use the left arrow to indicate which cell is our radius, and hit return, automatically calculating the area for us, executing that Visual Basic for Applications macro. And then we can click and drag this cell down, and we'll continue repeating this function for all of the respective radiuses. And now back to Jeff.
Thanks very much, Randy. Well, we've laid the basics of an object model and a common macro language for using and controlling objects. What we'd like to do now is talk about how to integrate enterprise data and enterprise services into your application And for that, we brought up Eric Wells from our Excel group. Eric?
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, I'm Eric Wells. I'm a product manager from Microsoft Excel, and I'd like to say a few words to you about Windows Open Services architecture and then actually show you a demonstration of some of the technology in Excel 5. What WOSA provides is a set of standards for getting data into and out of users' PCs on desktops in major corporations. What we're talking about as far as data sources in major corporations throughout the world, data currently resides in various sources, in mainframe databases, local databases, or you can even have a source of data coming from a continuous real-time stream of data, perhaps. As far as transferring data from a user's PC, there are various different mechanisms which are in place in major corporations which can be used for such transfer, either email systems or even over telephone networks. What WOSA provides is a set of standards which makes it easy for developers to take advantage of those different sources and transfer mechanisms of data in creating custom applications. Specifically, the way that those standards are delivered are through a set of APIs, and there are 3 of them which are shown here on the screen. We have Microsoft's Messaging API, the Telephony API, and ODBC. ODBC provides a standard way of getting data into and out of various sorts of database formats. The Telephony API provides a standard for communicating over telephone lines. And lastly, the Messaging API provides a standard for sending data through electronic mail systems. OK, why don't we go ahead and take a look at a demonstration of 2 of these pieces of technology in Excel 5 for Windows. Specifically, we'll take a look at ODBC and MAPI. OK, if we take a look at the screen right now, we have a worksheet in Excel 5. This is a sheet for a company called Encore Musical Instruments. And what I'd like to do is to build a sales summary on this sheet from a SQL Server database that the company uses to store data. I can do that very easily by using Excel's new pivot table feature, a feature which makes it very easy to look at large amounts of database data in various dynamic views. I create a pivot table by accessing the data menu here. I'll go ahead and select pivot table, and I get a choice of either using an Excel database or an external data source. I'll go ahead and use the external data source, and then click on the Get Data button, and this will take me into Microsoft Query. In Microsoft Query now, I can actually specify a new data source. And when I specify a new data source, you can see here that I have a listing of all the ODBC drivers which are installed on the system. So basically, I can access data out of any of these types of databases. I'm going to go ahead and select a SQL Server database, and then I'll go ahead and give this data source a name. I'll call it Encore. And then I'll specify the name of the SQL Server, which is DevServe. I'll then go ahead and use that data source, and then I'll be prompted to log on to the SQL Server database. And I'll type in the password here. Once I'm logged on, whoops, let me try typing in that password again. OK, one more time. My typing skills are not too good today. Well, it looks like it doesn't want to log on to the SQL Server today. Let's see if we have any other databases which are available on this particular machine. I'm going to go ahead and use the Office base source here. And again, it just doesn't want to log into that SQL Server. OK, let's see if we have a local database source here. And I'll go ahead and select the database. And we have a North Winds database here, so I'll go ahead and use that one in this particular case. And then I can go ahead and use that database, and now I can select from different tables within that database. I'm going to go ahead and select the Orders table here, and also the Customers table. And I'll select those 2. And you can see right now that I have a join between these 2 tables based on customer ID. Let's go ahead and select some fields out of these tables. I'm going to go ahead and select order amount, and then also order date. And then from the second table here, I'm going to go ahead and select the company name. And then also, let's go ahead and select the country here. OK, once we have that information, we can go ahead and return the data to Microsoft Excel and continue to build our pivot table using the pivot table wizard. What Excel is doing now is actually reading that data into a memory cache And I can now use that to build my pivot table. I'll go ahead and put order amount in the body of the table. I'll put order date along the columns, company in the rows, and then country over here in the page fields. Also, I'm going to specify that order amounts are displayed as a currency format. I'll go ahead and select OK. And then lastly, I'm going to tell Excel to put that pivot table directly onto the worksheet by selecting the Finish button there. Excel is now reading the data out of the memory cache and building the pivot table, and it will show up here on the sheet in just a second. Pivot tables are very useful for moving data around and looking at it from various different views. And I'll go ahead and select OK. And we should have the pivot table here in just a second. There it is. OK, so basically what we have order dates going across the top here. And then we have actual orders going down the rows of the database. And you'll notice that I have a drop-down list box up here at the top of the table, which I can use to actually look at different countries. I can look at data for Canada, or I can look at data for the UK or for the US, et cetera. Now that I've created my pivot table in Excel, what I'd like to do is to route this to other users in the company through mapping. And I can do that through Excel's routing feature. I'll go ahead and select File and then Add Routing Slip. And this will actually log me on to Microsoft Mail. And now I can address this worksheet to various different users in my company. I'll go ahead and select a few different users here, add them to the routing list. And you'll notice that I can route spreadsheets to users either sequentially, or I can do it in a parallel fashion, send it to all the users at once. So those are a couple of the key pieces of technology offered through the Windows Open Services architecture in Microsoft Excel 5. Specifically, I showed you demonstrations of the messaging API and ODBC. Back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Eric. And in the context of the solution we're going to be building, we're going to show you in a lot more detail how programmatically you can get at the WOSA APIs. And now it's actually time to build this customer information workbench. And maybe, Tom, you could tell us a little bit more about the architecture of the application?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The architecture of the application that we're going to be building is you can think of as being founded on many different layers of objects, many different layers of functionality supplied by many different software developers. At the lowest level, we have operating system services. As we've been speaking about WOSA, we have operating system services being accessed from the client side through the WOSA MAPI for messaging API, telephony or the TAPI API, or open database connectivity to give us access to local or remote data sources. On top of that, we have a layer of objects supplied by Microsoft Office, which are going to be communicating with each other through OLE 2.0 automation. We have Word 6.0 objects, we have Excel 5.0 object collection, and we're also going to be working with Microsoft Project supplied objects. Some of the most compelling types of objects, however, are not the kinds that you might buy from Microsoft, but the kinds that you might develop in-house or in your own organization that implement some of the business rules that you might want to use in many different situations and different solutions that you build. And in this case, we're actually going to be building a currency conversion object with Visual C++ 1.5 that knows automatically how to go out to a data source and get the current conversion rates, currency conversion rates, and update our sales information with either US dollar currency or their local equivalents. All of this foundation of objects will allow us to use very small, very focused snippets of VBA code to essentially wire these different pieces together in a highly custom way. The idea is that you need to be able to get the benefit of literally tens of millions of lines of code that have already been written that may in fact already, the majority of which may be on your users' desks in the form of productivity applications, and leverage that investment, leverage all that work that the rest of the industry has done, and make your custom solution building as powerful and yet as simple as you possibly can. So what I'd like to talk about now is we ought to go into the specific requirements for the sales analysis module. Jeff, what do you think we ought to have in a sales analysis module?
Okay, Tom, what I think we've heard customers tell us are some of their key requirements for a sales analysis or executive information system type application is to view all their enterprise in a single consistent way and view it with a tremendous amount of flexibility so that they can do their own ad hoc analysis based on a spreadsheet type paradigm, or there's a simplified user interface that the developer puts on front of all this data for them to slice and dice it, look at data by region, by country, by product, and over various periods of time, and do that with a lot of flexibility and simplicity. And to show us actually how to build this sales analysis module of this application, we brought back Randy Catt. Randy?
Thanks, Jeff. Before we begin building this solution, I'd like to first just describe quickly the architecture of this solution. We chose to use Excel as the primary development environment because of 3 reasons. First of all, Excel provides Visual Basic for Applications support. And through Visual Basic for Applications, we can access an OLE automation object we've built using Visual C++ that does our currency conversion. Secondly, because Visual Basic for Applications provides a very convenient way of controlling Excel's objects. And we'll take advantage of a couple of those different objects in this application, or in this component of the application. One of those objects is the pivot table. The pivot table, you'll see, provides us with a method of building lots of different views of our data into our sales data that we'll look at by territory. And finally, the Microsoft Query tool provides access to our SQL Server data residing on a Windows NT Advanced Server system. So now let's turn our attention back to the system and start building it. We start here with a spreadsheet in Excel, which represents all of our different sales territories in color-coded regions. What we'd like to do first is just name this worksheet Sales Analysis. And the reason we'll do this is so that we can refer to our worksheet programmatically from within Visual Basic for Applications. The next thing we can do is let's select this entire sheet, click our right mouse button on it, and choose Format Cells. And from here, in this dialog, we'll choose the Patterns tab dialog, and we'll select a color for the background that's just a little bit more appealing than the spreadsheet cells. Now that we've got it a little more presentable, what we need to do next is tie in all of our territory sales data directly to these different regions on our screen. So to do that, let's first insert a new worksheet where we're going to pull our sales data into. Let's call this worksheet Sales Data. And now, let's invoke the Microsoft Query tool to get the data from our SQL Server database. So we'll call Get External Data from our Data menu. And then we'll choose Office Base, which represents our sales data. And to log into our SQL Server database, we type in our password. And then it comes up and shows us all the different tables that we have available to us. For our sales data, the View Sales Analysis data is the table we're looking for. We'll add that. And we're interested in looking at all of the different fields available to us in this table, so we'll choose to add them all. Now finally, we'll return this data to Microsoft Excel and store it right here in this new worksheet called Sales Data. And you can see how it just automatically updates all of our data for us in the database and brings it right into this worksheet. Now if you notice, all of our sales data is cut many different ways. We have information by territory, category, supplier, employee, quarter, country. And we also show these sales figures in currency values representative of the specific countries that they came from. Also notice that the US dollars column is all zeroed out. What we need to do is convert all of our sales from the specific currency they're in to a format in US dollars. To do that, we need to write a Visual Basic for Applications macro that accesses our corporate currency conversion object. So let's insert a new module into this work group. And we'll call this module SA mod, for Sales Analysis module. And in this module then, let's write a macro to use OLE automation and control this Visual C++ object that converts our currency. So let's call it currency converter object. We'll call the module SA convert currency. And we'll dimension a variable in this macro called conv for convert as type object, which represents the OLE automation variant data type. Now we'll assign that convert object equal to the result of calling the create object function, which allows us to establish an OLE automation link to our corporate object. We've called this currency converter. And registered it with the OLE registry using that name. Now that we've established a link to our object, let's activate our worksheet. sales data. And then what we'll do in this worksheet is simply loop through all of the cells in a given selection. So we'll use the new for each language statement in Visual Basic for application. And then for each cell, we'll simply set the conversion object by country property equal to the symbol USD for the US dollars. And we'll assign the conversion object cell country property equal to the cell, whoops, a little typo there. The value of our cell offset 2 positions to the left of our selected cell, which represents the currency conversion object format type. And finally, we'll set the cell's value equal to the result of calling the convert function in the convert object. And it takes one argument, the value of the native currency format. So again, using the cell offset 0, -1 this time, representing the cell to our immediate left. Now, once we're done using or converting all of our different cells, we're finished using this object. And we can free that object by simply assigning the value of the variable equal to nothing. And then we are done with this macro and can return back to our sales data sheet by clicking on the Sheet tab. And to access that macro then, let's first draw a button on our worksheet. We'll assign that macro convert currency, and we'll give the button a new title. And remember that our macro required us to select the cells we wish to convert. So let's select all of the US dollar column, and then click on the button to invoke our macro. Now this starts our corporate object, which will go out and query a SQL Server database to determine the up-to-date currency conversion information. Notice that it goes cell by cell and determines the value of the currency format in US dollars. Now once that's done, we'll have our entire table completed with all of the different columns filled out, so we can actually now look at our sales data in all of many different ways, including US dollars, so we can effectively compare the different figures together. So to make this data really useful now, let's insert one more worksheet where we'll place a pivot table, and we'll call this worksheet Sales Summary. And in the Sales Summary worksheet then, I'll just simply invoke the pivot table wizard. And for the range of data we want to use in this pivot table, we'll just click back on our sales data sheet and then select the entire range of data. Choose Next. Now notice that the pivot table wizard allows us to set up our pivot table using this data in any way we choose. We can place our territory, our category over in these page columns. US dollars is the data we're interested in seeing. We can place our categories either in the page setup or in the rows. We can cut this by quarter. We can also use by country. So effectively, the pivot tables allows us a great deal of flexibility in how we want to look at this specific data. So let's go on the next step and give this pivot table a name. We'll call it Sales Summary Pivot. And now notice the value of the pivot table here. Being able to look at the different types of data by simply dragging the new pages directly on top of the table gives us a new cut at our data. Also, what we can do using the auto format feature in Excel, we can make this pivot table a little bit more appealing. Choose one of the colorful formats. And just makes the data a little bit nicer to look at. So let's look at this by category. And notice also that on our territory page, we have all of our different regions we can look at individually, or we can choose to look at all territories at once. Well, this is going to be very useful for us as we switch back over to our sales analysis sheet. Remember that the final step in our component here is that we need to link our regions directly to those different pivot tables. We'll do that by drawing a text box over our regions. Then by clicking the right mouse button on that text box, we can simply set these the format of this object to have no border and no fill pattern, making it effectively a transparent object. We'll then give it a name, which represents the specific territory of data we're looking for. And then finally, what we need to do is write a macro, one more Visual Basic for Applications macro, that allows us to click on this object and immediately show the pivot table data. So let's switch back over to our sales module, sales analysis module, and add one more function. We'll call it show sales data. And let's dimension a string called name string. And we'll assign that string equal to application.caller, which represents the name of the object which calls this macro. Now let's activate our worksheet. This time we're looking at the sales summary worksheet, the one having the pivot table on it. Then with that active sheet, we'll choose from the pivot table collection and specifically identify our pivot table we just named as sales summary pivot. And now let's use the line continuation character new to Visual Basic for Applications because we have a few more statements we need to place on this line. The next thing we want to do is choose the page fields collection within that pivot table and assign that equal to the territory one, or reference the territory page field, and then access the current page property in that object and set it equal to the value name string. And we are done with this macro. Now, so let's switch back over to our sales analysis sheet and now assign this object to that macro, show sales data. And now by simply clicking on this button, we get immediately linked to our pivot table showing the territory of sales data for North America specifically. And now by switching back over to our sales analysis and repeating the process of drawing a box around our region, we can take advantage of the same code we just wrote, give it a name, and then assign it to that macro, show sales data. And now when we click it, I must have hit a typo in there. Okay, I might have got the name wrong. Definitely got the name wrong. So let's give it a new name, South America. And now when we click on it, it shows us the data for the sales data for South America. So you can see now how Visual Basic for Applications combined with the functionality of the pivot table and our Ole automation corporate convergency object converter provides a very seamless way to build a component of the workstation. Now back to Tom.
Great, thanks, Randy. Let's take a look at some of the technology that we use there, just so that you understand all of the pieces that we're building on top of. First, we're using Microsoft Excel as a source of objects. We're also using it as the substrate on which we're building this solution. Within Microsoft Excel, we're using the pivot table object extensively, using buttons and the worksheet objects, as well as the application objects itself. Visual Basic for Applications is functioning as the glue that lets us piece or wire these individual parts together with exactly the specific business logic that we need for this particular solution. Ole 2.0 is providing the communications object model, giving us the way that, providing us the mechanism that allows all of these objects to interoperate using this code. Microsoft Excel is, of course, working through its own query tool to populate its pivot tables and its worksheets using ODBC connections to SQL Server. In this case, we gave Randy the actual, the correct password that gave him access to the SQL Server, where he got access to both the sales data as well as the currency conversion data, to which he got access using the currency conversion object, which we had given him that we had built with Visual C++ 1.5. So let's look at the next module. Jeff, what do you think some of the requirements would be for the budgeting solution?
Well, Tom, a lot of people use spreadsheets for budgeting as well as sales analysis. But typically, the budgeting process involves lots of people from lots of different groups who are in a bottom-up budgeting process contributing different expense or sales forecast information. A lot of companies have also used their budgets from previous years to extrapolate as the basis of their forecast for future periods, and a good budgeting solution should make it very easy for people to do that forecasting based on prior expense or sales data. But just as we did with the sales analysis module, we really need as a developer to take control over the user interface to make drill down analysis of the budget much easier for our users. And to build the budgeting module, we have once again Eric Wells joining us. Eric?
Thanks, Jeff. Luckily, no password typing this time around. But anyway, what I'd like to show you this time is we're going to go over the design of the budget module in the customer information workbench that we have been developing here. And basically, we're going to be touching upon a couple of different pieces of technology here in Excel 5. First of all, I'm going to be showing you an example of some tools which can be created using Visual Basic for applications in Excel to make it easy for users to adjust values in cells. What these tools are going to be used in the budgeting module for is to do some fine-tune adjusting to the actual forecast that the company is going to be doing. Also, we're going to be using Excel's outlining technology. This is a very useful technology which allows you to drill down and get into detailed data on your spreadsheet data. And then lastly, we are actually going to write a Visual Basic for Applications macro, which is going to allow our user to route this budget sheet through Microsoft Mail. Let's go ahead and take a look at the application. First of all, what we have displayed here on the screen is an Excel 5 worksheet with the company's planned budget. You can see in the table here that we have the planned revenue for the 4 quarters of 1994. And then going down the rows of the table, we have the different regions of the world that the company does business in. And then, of course, the numbers are in the body of the table. You may notice that there are some buttons over here on the side of the worksheet as well as at the top of the worksheet. These are outlining buttons. These allow you to actually drill down and get into greater detail on the data. For example, if I click on the plus button here associated with Africa, I can actually drill down and look at the numbers for all the different products in Africa. Or I can even scroll down and say, look at the data for Asia as well. If I go up to the top, I can use these buttons up here to look at the actual sales data for the previous year. If I click on the plus button here for Q1 94, I can actually look at the actual revenue for Q1 93 as well as the percentage change that we are forecasting for Q1 94. Okay, what I would like to do now is to give my users a couple of tools here on the screen which will make it very easy for them to make some fine-tuning adjustments to this percentage change for the forecast for 1994. The first thing I'm going to do is to change the name of this worksheet, and just so it's going to be easy for programming purposes. And I do that by clicking the right mouse button on the Worksheet tab and then selecting Rename. And now I can give my worksheet any name that I choose. I'm going to go ahead and call this Budget Sheet. Okay, next I would like to add some buttons here on my screen that are going to allow my user to launch the VBA macro to do the adjustments. And I'll put those buttons on the screen by bringing up the Forms toolbar. Forms toolbar provides a whole series of on-sheet controls you can use in Excel 5. I'm going to use the Create Button button here and just draw a button directly on the sheet. And I'm not going to assign any macro to the button at this time, but I will put a caption on here to indicate that the button can be used to increase the percentage of the forecast. Let's go ahead now and write a macro which we can put behind that button. And I'll do that again by clicking the right mouse button on the Worksheet tab and selecting Insert. And then I will insert a Visual Basic for Applications module. Okay, I start a macro by using the substatement, and I'm going to call this macro increment. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to employ a new construct in Visual Basic for Applications called the for each construct. And what for each allows me to do, it allows me to actually cycle through all the elements in a collection. So I'll say for each cell in selection, and I'll say cell.value is equal to cell.value plus 0.01 or plus 1%, and then next cell. And so when my user runs this macro, it will go through, and every time the button is clicked, it will increment the values of the cells in the selection by 1 percentage point. I'll now go back to the budget sheet, and now all I have to do is attach this macro to the button. So I'll click the right mouse button and select Assign Macro, and then assign the increment macro to that button. And now you'll notice that when I select a range of cells here, I can click on this button, and Excel will go through and increment all the values in the cells by 1 percentage point. In fact, I can expand the display over here, and you'll notice that I can even select a discontiguous range of cells here. And by running this macro, Excel will cycle through all the cells in the selection and increment all the values by 1 percentage point. OK, now what I'd like to do is to add a second tool which allows my user to decrement the values in the cells. And I'll do that just by copying the button down here by holding down the Control key and using Excel's copy and drop feature. And then I'll change this plus sign to a minus sign. Let's now go back to the Visual Basic for Applications module. And the decrement macro is going to be very similar to the increment macro. So I'm going to go ahead and take this code and copy it, and then come down here and just paste it. And I'll change the name to decrement. And then I'm going to change this plus sign over here to a minus. So instead of adding 1 percentage point, it will subtract 1 percentage point. I now go back to the budget sheet. And again, I click the right mouse button on the button there, and select Assign Macro, and then Decrement. And now you'll notice that when I select a range of cells, by clicking on the Decrement button, I can actually decrease their values by 1 percentage point. OK, those are a couple of tools that you can add to do some fine-tuning adjustments to values in cells on a worksheet. Let's go ahead now and write a Visual Basic for Applications macro, which will allow our users to route this spreadsheet through Microsoft Mail. I'm going to go back to my VBA module here. And I'll scroll down a little bit here. And I'm going to start a new macro, which I'll call Route Sheet. And the first thing I like this macro to do is I know that when this macro is running, there's going to be a lot of things going on the screen that I don't want my user to see. So I'd like to turn off the screen updating so you don't see all this flashing on the screen. And I do that through an application.screenUpdating equals false. It sets the screen updating property of the application to not update what's going on the screen. Next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to add a new workbook, because I'm not actually going to route this whole enterprise information system here. I just want to route a single worksheet that has a summary of my budgeting information. So I'm going to add a new workbook to do that. So I'll do workbooks.add. And then I'd like to copy the budget sheet to that new workbook. So I'll do a workbooks, and the name of this workbook is budget. And then the name of the worksheet is budget sheet. And I'm going to copy that. So I'll employ the copy method. And then the destination I'd like to copy that to is to the workbook that I just added. So I'll do an active workbook.sheets1. And that tells Excel to put the worksheet into the first position in the active workbook. OK, next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to call up the routing dialog box. And I do that through an application.dialogs. And I know there are built-in constants in Excel which allow me to access all of the built-in dialogs available in Excel. But my memory is failing me today, as you noticed when I tried to type in the password earlier. And what I'm going to do now is bring up Excel's object browser to help me find the name of that constant which refers to the routing dialog. All I have to do is click on the object browser button here, and you'll notice I can look at all the different libraries and workbooks which are open right now. I'll go ahead and look in the Excel library of objects and scroll down here to constants. And that will bring up a whole list of built-in constants which are available in Excel. And as we scroll down here, you can see that there are a whole lot of constants which are available for dialog boxes. And there's one right here called Excel Dialog Routing Slip. That's the one I want. I'm going to go ahead and paste that directly into my code. And then I'll go ahead and implement the show method to show that dialog. That will bring up the routing dialog box. And then after my user is done routing the application, I want to close down the file that was used to do the routing. And before I do that, I'm going to turn off all display of any alerts that may prompt the user to save that file by doing an application dot display alerts equals false. And then I'll go ahead and close that workbook. And then do an insub. OK, that is the macro. Let's go ahead and go back to our budget sheet. And we'll add a button to the sheet to do the routing. Let's go ahead and add it right there. And we'll assign the route sheet macro to that button. And I'll change the caption to route. And now when I click on that button, first thing will happen is the screen updating will turn off. Then it will copy the worksheet to the new workbook and bring up the routing dialog here, as you can see here. And I can go ahead and select different people within the company to address this to, add them to the address list, and then even type in a message here. Please review. And when I'm done, I can go ahead and route that. And that will then run the rest of the macro and close down the file that was used for routing. If I go to Microsoft Mail now, you can see that actual mail message has indeed been routed through mail. You can see it here. You can see the packaged worksheet that was included through the VBA macro. OK, that is the budgeting aspect of the application. And let's go back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Eric. Let's just review some of the technology that we added in this particular module. Once again, we're using Microsoft Excel as the substrate to provide the foundation for the application that we're building, using many of its fully programmable objects, taking advantage of its user interface capabilities, adding button objects, using the outlining capabilities built into the worksheets, getting access to the sales data, using the Microsoft Query tool, going through ODBC to get access to the historic sales data, and then ultimately integrating the routing functionality, going through MAPI, the messaging API, and making it very easy for you to circulate this particular piece of work that you've done to other people in your work group. All of these features fully integrated makes it much easier for us to perform the particular budgeting functions that we have to do on an annual basis. So we still have a few more modules left to implement. We still want to build our reporting module. Let's talk about some of the reporting module solution requirements. Jeff?
Sure, Tom. Reporting in particular, but document preparation in general, is a very tedious task for many people. There's a lot of manual steps that need to go on to create a good report or a good document, be it an internal document or an external document going out to a customer. However, this is how you represent yourself internally. This is how the information that people use to make decisions. This is how customers gauge the quality of the work that you do for them. Therefore, companies need a very consistent and clear document preparation and reporting process. They need this process to be integrated with the tools they use on a day-to-day basis, things like the sales analysis or budget preparation modules that you saw earlier. And this process should be automated, not manual, and should take data out of the system that you're working on. So to actually show you how to build the reporting module of this system, we've brought up John Vale from the Word Group. John?
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, I'm John Vale, and I'm a product manager with the Word product group here at Microsoft. In this section of the Customer Information Workbench, we're going to see how we can use both Word and Excel to automate the process of generating a budget report. Now, on your screen, you should see a diagram of how this process is going to proceed. We're going to start with Microsoft Excel, and we're going to use Visual Basic for applications to query an ODBC database using Microsoft Query. Now, Microsoft Query is a shared component that all the Microsoft applications use to query single-tier and multiple-tier databases. Once that information is brought back into Microsoft Excel, we're going to analyze it, then we're going to select it, and then we're going to place it into a Word document via OLE automation. We're going to be using the different objects inside of Microsoft Word to perform this operation. As a matter of fact, we'll take a look at some of these a little bit later on. Once that document's been created, we're then going to go through the process of saving it and then routing it out, again, via MAPI to other users on the network. Now, in this discussion, we need to take a look at three critical areas. First of all, we're using both Word and Excel, which are general business productivity tools, to build as components of this line of business solution. What's important about this is that not only do these applications give you a lot of tools as users to perform operations, but also as developers, they both give you a lot of tools to create your own custom solutions. Second, we're using the different objects inside of Microsoft Word to perform these operations. Microsoft Word provides you with over 800 individual properties and methods that you can use to manipulate information inside of your documents. And finally, we use both Word and Excel to access industry-wide standards like MAPI and ODBC. Now let's go ahead and switch to our code, and we'll see exactly how we're going to proceed through this operation. What we have here in Microsoft Excel is we have a sheet that's going to act as the pivotal point for our demonstration. And I'm just going to go through and perform a couple formatting operations to begin with. I'm going to simply select the entire sheet and then click with the right mouse button on the sheet and choose Format Cells. And then from our tabbed dialog box, I'm going to choose Patterns, and I'm going to choose a light yellow color and choose OK. The next thing I need to do is I need to identify what this sheet is going to be named. So I'll double click on the Sheet 4 tab, and I'll type in Reports. Then I'll choose OK, and now our sheet is now called Reports. Now I need to add a control onto our graphic here that will be used to launch our macro. We'll choose the text box tool on the toolbar, and we'll draw a text box. And I'll type in Budget Report. I'll highlight that text, and I'll go ahead and make it bold, and I'll make it easier to see. I'll pop it up to 12 point. Now I'm going to select our text box and choose the right mouse button and choose Format Object. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that to bright yellow. And while it's selected, I'm going to go ahead and name this object Budget. Now finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the right mouse button, and I'm going to choose Assign Macro. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the name of a macro that we're going to create in a moment here. And it will be called REP _ do report. So now what's going to happen is what we're going to do is we're going to create this macro that when I click on the budget object here, it's going to switch to the budget and plan sheet, select this information over here, go back to reports, and then proceed with the process of creating the document in Word. So let's go ahead and insert a module now by clicking on the right mouse button and choosing the Insert menu item. And we'll choose Module and click OK. What I'm going to do is I'm going to proceed through and create some of the code here. I'll type in sub, and we'll type in REP _ do report. And I'll go ahead, whoops, typing problems. And I'll type in nsub. And I'm going to begin by identifying a variable as a string. I'll type dim name string as string. And we're going to set that variable equal to a constant called application.caller. Now application.caller is a property that's on the application object that allows us to determine what object or which control is actually calling the subroutine. So in this case, it's going to be called budget. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to our budget and plan worksheet. I can do that by typing in application.worksheets, and then I'll type in budget and plan. And then I'll set the activate property. Now what I need to do is I need to select the range on that sheet. So I'll type in range, and then I'll type in cells 7, 3. This is the upper left-hand corner of our selection. Then I'll type in cells, and I'll type in 71, 18. And I'll set the copy method. Now we could have also gone in and set a range, named a range on that sheet as well, and copied it as well. But in this case, we want to show you another method. Now what I need to do is I need to switch back to the report sheet. I'll type in application.worksheets. And I'll name that sheet reports. And I'll type in activate. So we've gone through the process of selecting the information from the Excel worksheet. Now what I need to do is I need to initiate the conversation into Microsoft Word. And I'll do that by typing in dim Word object as object. And now I need to set that object a handle to the Word Basic object. So I'll type in set Word object equal to create object, then Word.basic. Now once we've done that, we can now send a series of commands into Word to have it perform a set of operations. We're going to do that using a construct in Excel, or VBA, called the with construct. And we'll type in with Word object, and then I'll type in end with. And now we're going to perform a series of operations in Microsoft Word. We'll start by typing in File New, And we'll set that template equal to the normal template. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Microsoft Word and Word Basic, the syntax here should look very similar. Again, you can leverage your experience using Microsoft Word Basic when you're using OLE automation and VBA. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that selection and I'm going to paste it into our document. Now, that selection, I'm pasting it in just by doing a normal paste, but if I wanted to paste it in as an OLE object, I'd use an edit paste special. And in this case, I'd set my class equal to excel.sheet.5 and my data type equal to object. Now, when we place information into our Word document, it's going to be selected, so I need to deselect it to perform some operations on it. So I'll just simply move the cursor by typing in a page up. Then I'm going to use a table auto format command, which takes advantage of some of the new auto features inside of Microsoft Word that allows us to automatically format a document or a table based upon some predefined styles. In this case, I'll type in format equals 9, which is simply the 9th element in the list box in the table auto format dialog box. And I'll type in color equals 1 so that we maintain a nice colorful sheet here. And let me scroll down so we can see this a little easier. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this document. So I'll type in File, Save As, and I'll type in name equal to name string, which in this case is going to be budget. Well, we're done with this section of the code. Let's go ahead and switch back to our reports module. And let's go ahead and click on the budget report object. You can see here we select the text or the information from Excel, and then we launch Microsoft Word, create a document in Word, place the table inside of Word, then auto-format it and save the document as budget.doc. Now, I still have some other things I need to do here. Let's go ahead and switch back to our module. What I want to do is I want to route that out to some other people on the network. And I can do that using some of the built-in workgroup features inside of Microsoft Word. I'll type in File, Routing Slip, and I'm going to set clear recipients to begin with. I'll set that equal to 1. We clear the recipients to begin with to make sure that we clear any people that may have been on the distribution list before. And I'll type in File, Routing Slip again. And I'm going to set this an address now. I'll type in address equals, and now I can type in the name, Sue Miller. And I'm going to type add recipient, so we add her to the distribution list. Now, the thing that's nice here is that if you had a series or an array of users that you wanted to distribute this document to, what you could do is you could create that array and then just loop through it using a for loop and setting the same exact operation here for each one of those array elements. Now, finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in File, Routing Slip, and I'm going to type in a subject message here. The subject in this case is going to be budget report. And the message is going to be please comment ASAP. And now we'll choose to route the document. So that pretty much finishes our code for this section here. So we've cleared the recipients, we've added a person who's going to receive the document, and then we specified some information that they're going to get in the mail message. So let's go ahead and switch back to our reports sheet and click on the budget report button again. Again, we select the text or the worksheet, go back to Word, insert this information, auto-format it, then we'll save it, and then we're going to route it out via MAPI. Once this operation is complete, we'll go back to Microsoft Excel. Now, the last thing we want to see is we want to go to Microsoft Mail. And I want to show you that that document has been already sent. We'll choose to click on it. And you can see in this case that we have budget report as our subject field. We have please comment ASAP as our message. And also down below, we have budget.doc, which is the document we just created. If I double click on it, we go back to Microsoft Word. And we have the document that we just created. So there you have it. So what we see in this section is we've been able to use both Microsoft Word and Excel as components of a line of business solution. We've taken a look at some of the objects inside of Microsoft Word for OLE automation. And finally, we've shown you how both Word and Excel provide us with programmatic interfaces into industry standard technologies like MAPI and ODBC. So it's back to you, Jeff.
Actually, Tom's going to take us through an overview of some of the technology. Tom,
Sure. Okay. As you can see, our application is about halfway done. We have 3 of our modules completed at this point. We finished our sales analysis module, our budget module, and now our reports module. Again, building on top of Microsoft Excel 5.0's core object set, and through OLE automation and VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, tying in Microsoft Word 6.0, our most recently shipping Office 4 application that exposes an incredible set of functionality itself in the form of its Word Basic object. Of course, getting access to the various WOSA services, in this case, including MAPI, as well as through ODBC, getting access to our sales data and our SQL Server information. So we still have 3 left to go. We still have a communications module to build. Communications where we build our expanded Rolodex with automatic access to our customers, suppliers, and employees. Jeff, what do you think we need for this one?
Well, Tom, if you take a look at how most people track all the people they have to deal with in the course of doing business, their customers, their suppliers, their employees, they do it in really many discrete systems. Maybe they have a handful of cards business cards for customers they track, or a Rolodex of them, or maybe they track their employees in a human resource management system. Well, as part of integrating all this information in a system, we can now leverage that and communicate to people in various ways, be it customers through mass marketing or suppliers through phone and fax. And we're going to show in this demonstration how to essentially get the company in this scenario on the information highway, if you will, by integrating some new exciting communications media into their application. And for building the communications part of the customer information workbench, I'd like to bring up Kavi Singh. Kavi?
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, my name is Kavi Singh, and I work with the Solution Developer Relation Group here in Microsoft. Today I will be building the communications module for you. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at the architecture of this module. As you can see, I will be using VBA from within Excel 5 to build my module. And the VBA language is going to be my development tool, and Excel is going to be my construction site. And I will reach out from within VBA and Excel 5 to touch key technologies like Microsoft Telephony API, which is shipping now, and Microsoft at Word Fax, which is bundled with the Windows for Workgroups 3.11. I will also use some OLE automation to accomplish my tasks. Having taken a look at the architecture, let's go ahead and build it. I have in front of me a user interface which looks like a Rolodex. As we can see, I can scroll through my customers one by one. And these customers are kept as information on this spreadsheet. And I have several columns of information here: ID, company, name, title, address, phone, fax, etc. And I do get them out and display them very well here. And how do we accomplish that? Well, I have help from the scroll bar on-sheet control, which is supplied with Microsoft Excel 5.0. Let me show you the most critical property of this control, which helps me accomplish my task. This current value variable points to the row of the spreadsheet where I want to pick up data from and bring it into my spreadsheet, into my Rolodex. So let's go out and take a look at row 2. As you notice, we have always open quick mart up here. And row number 2 indeed is always open quick mart. And then this value is used by the code behind this control, which we shall go and see now, to do its job of scrolling. This is the function that does this: com do scroll bar. The most important row of code is this: n row equals active sheet.scrollbars com scrollbar.value. What this row of code, what it accomplishes is goes to the active sheet, goes through its scroll bars, gets our scroll bar, its value, and brings it into this variable for us. And then we have a pointer into our data sheet. Having that pointer, we go down into this helper functions and copy over values of the cells one by one, which we require, into text boxes on this sheet. Those text boxes are these. Comtext company 4, 3, 2, 1. Then we have the contact name. We have their title. We have their phone number and their fax ID in our Microsoft at Work fax system. And that helper function, copy to box, which I use repeatedly, is right here, sub copy to box. And this syntax is similar to what we did above. It just goes out, gets the cell I specify from my customer's data sheet, and puts it into the text box I specify as a parameter here, box name. Very well. With the user interface out of our way, let's go ahead and do some communications. First of all, I'd like to call up my customers by phone. Let's get this toolbar with all the on-sheet controls that Excel provides as part of VBA, and pick up the button, draw it, and assign to it this macro, com do phone, and appropriately label the button phone. Let's implement it. Sub com do phone. The first thing I need in this macro is who am I calling up? The phone number. And that's equal to active sheet dot text boxes com text phone dot value. This text box is this one right here, com text phone. With the phone number in hand, let's place the call with a TAPI function call. TA TAPI request make call to my phone number, and let's give it some null parameters which we don't really care about, their application name, etc., etc. And end this up and check it out. Whoops. We shall go back and appropriately get it text. Because the text box doesn't have value, it has text. OK, my TAPI dialer is up. It's ringing up. And I'm placing my call. We have done it.
Hello.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Kavi, how's it going over there?
Good. How do you like this technology?
Well, it's OK so far, but I think you still have a little work left to do.
Good. Let me show you some faxing.
I look forward to it.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye. Let's hang up. This is the dialer. Let's examine what happened here. I placed this call with a function call into tapi.dll, TA TAPI request make call. And this DLL took this call and fielded it over to dialer.exe, which is the TAPI server that ships with the TAPI SDK. This server picked up this request and drove the physical phone line to place a call to Tom. And I had my talk with Tom. Let's go ahead and use these concepts and some more technology to do some more communications. Let's do some faxing. Let's select this button. Pick it up, copy it. And this button is going to do fax for me. And I'm going to assign to it a macro, do fax. And let's go and do fax. Sub, com, do fax. Once again, the first thing we need, let's get this out of the way. The first thing we need is our fax ID. Copy this line of code, reuse it here. Change phone number to fax ID. And this part of the text box name to fax. Gotta get this right. And this text box is this one right here, comtext fax. OK, we have our fax ID. Let's go and make the fax call with a new workbook, which we're going to add right here. Take the active workbook and do send mail on it, which is a method on the workbook object. And our recipients are going to be fax ID, which we have defined right above. And after we're done faxing, we just close our workbook, which we created for this demonstration. And we're done. Let's go ahead and check it out. And here we go. The workbook's up, and we have a problem. Let's go back and send it to active sheet.textboxes context fax. Let me try this name. Oops, a small syntax error here. As you see, VBA, we have to pass parameters with colon equal to. There we go. Our faxing is done. Let's go and see what mail's doing. We are initializing the modem. And here's the fax in the outbox going out. And as you can hear my modem ringing, I'm placing the fax call. There we go. That's the modem connecting. And our fax is going out. Let's talk about what happened here, apart from the syntax error. We sent out mail to a fax address in mail, which was set up as a Microsoft at Work address. If you had Windows for Workgroups 3.1.1 at this point on your desktop, you would receive this fax as a message in your inbox. Alternatively, if you had a fax machine on your desktop, Microsoft at Work fax technology would make absolutely sure that the fax printed on your fax machine. So we have added communication capabilities at this point to do phones and faxes to our customers. Let's go ahead and expand the phone functionality by doing a call down script. Let's explore this concept. Imagine, if you will, the phone routine I wrote earlier could be put in a loop and asked to call a series of numbers. It would go through those series of numbers and place calls for you. But you still need someone to talk to the person on the other side. And depending on the kind of customer you're calling, maybe they're big customers or small customers or new people which are not your customers yet, you would need different kinds of scripts to talk to them. And scripts we denote with flowcharts. So to do scripts, we have at our disposal a drawing tool today called Visio from Shapewear Corporation. It's a drawing tool for business people. And what I'm going to do is drive Visio through Olay automation and make it customize my chart for me. Let me show you the blank template of the chart I will use. Here's the Visio chart. Let me magnify it for you. We noticed it's a simple flow chart with a start, a decision being made, and the result being yes or no. Depending on yes or no, we do a yes process or a no process. At the end, we wrap up, and then we stop. What we're going to do is say hello to my customer or the person you're calling. Ask them if they're existing customers. And if yes, then take feedback from them. If they're not, well, introduce our products to them. And finally, fill out a call report. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's change this to call down script. And assign to it a macro called do flowchart. Let's implement it. Subcom do flow chart. The first thing I need is, who is the customer? Let's just reuse some code. Paste it. And cust ID equals contact. Then we do dim VOBJ as object. Dim VOBJ as object. This is a line of code you should watch carefully. It opens up the world of Visio's objects to me once I create an object with visio.application. Dim anything as object going forward is going to be your gateway into the world of objects of any application that supports Ole automation. Let's go ahead in this case and get to Visio. Set VOBJ equals create object visio.application. Let's do some coding. VOBJ.documents, open our DevCast.vsd, which is the template I just showed you. And with VOBJ's active page, grab its shapes, especially the starting shape, and make its text equal to hello. And concatenate that string with our customer ID. So it's going to be hello customer name. And then I will reuse this piece of code and paste it here. Delete this. And now we're going to work with the decision shape and make it existing customer. For illustration, just let's do these two statements and sub here. What this is going to do is open up Visio and change these properties. Let's go and try it. Visio's up, and so is our template, and a couple of text boxes have been changed. Let's magnify them. Existing customer, that's the question being asked on the decision box. And here's hello Melissa Adams, who's our customer being called at this point. As you see, I went out through Ole automation and changed a Visio flowchart. Let's summarize here. We started out with a customer database and a user interface to display it. And we added powerful technology which allowed me to make phone calls, send faxes, and as well as prepare automated call down scripts through Ole automation. With that, I would like to hand over back to you, Tom.
Great, thanks, Kavi. Well, hopefully you're starting to get an idea of some of the implications of what it would mean to build your custom solutions out of these components. Using productivity applications and Ole 2.0 being an open object specification allows many other ISVs to contribute their own applications as sources of programmable objects as well, as is the case with Visio from Shapeware Corporation. Using Microsoft Excel 5.0 and Word 6.0 through their Ole automation programmable interfaces, integrated or wired together using our Visual Basic for Applications language, gives us a very powerful way to integrate productivity applications with your enterprise services in a way really never before practical. So we still have one more major module to build before the break. We still want to find out how we can connect to our AS400 to get inventory information. Jeff, why don't we talk about what that solution is going to look like?
Sure, Tom. Let's switch briefly to summarize the requirements for the inventory module. Basically, we're going to try to do two things, get the best of both worlds. One, we're going to try to re-engineer our inventory process, put a very sophisticated user interface that's easy for somebody to manipulate, drive the latest in inventory management technologies like just-in-time inventory management, for example. Yet at the same time, leverage our existing mainframe or mini computer data. In this case, we'll have a live connection to an AS400. And to build this system, this piece of the system, we've brought up Satya Nadella. Satya?
Thanks, Jeff. Before we go into the actual implementation, let's take a quick look at the application architecture. As you can see, the most important architectural requirement for this piece is to be able to integrate data which exists on a host or a mainframe right now into Excel. Excel being our front-end tool, and the AS400 in our case being the data repository. And in addition to that, we also want to be able to add functionality, because once we have the data in Excel, we have all the APIs available. You've seen a lot of those rich APIs being used throughout the day, and we will use some of that APIs. So to drill down a little further on the architecture, at the very bottom, what we have is Windows NT running SNA Server. SNA Server provides us the base level connectivity to the host. In this case, it's an AS400. So it talks the right network protocol over the right physical network. In this case, it happens to be DLC over a token ring network. And once the base level connectivity is established, it also provides us with the APIs or programming interfaces to write specialized pieces of software which allow better interoperability. And one of those pieces of software is actually Waldata's Rumba SQL session. And what Waldata's Rumba SQL session does for us is it provides a driver which lets us look at data which happens to be on a DRDA database on AS400 as if it were just yet another ODBC data source. So now that we have ODBC, we have in effect an ODBC data source, we can pull the data up using MS Query into Excel. And once we have the data, we use OLE automation, or rather with using OLE automation, we drive Word to create a purchase order automatically for us. Since we are in this, the application is being to do inventory tracking, we want to be able to get the latest and greatest product information, check what the stock levels are, and based on the reorder level and the present stock quantities, we want to be able to automatically generate a purchase document which gets sent to our purchasing department. And that's what you see in that terms of OLE automation going to a Word document and then creating a mail message using MAPI. Now that we have the overview of the architecture, let me go down and try and show you how we can bring down host data and integrate it with Excel. For that, I'll bring up the SNA client environment. And we see three icons here. We have a setup program. We have two applets, a 3270 and a 5250 applets. And both these applets let us connect onto a host and run host-based programs. What I'm going to use is a 5250 applet. Let me maximize this. And I'm going to go into session configuration and select the AS400. The AS400 I'm going to be using today is Olympia, and this is an AS400 which is on a building across from here. And then I'm going to just say connect. It comes back with a login screen, and I go ahead and log in. And at this point, what's happening is the SNA server is going in and establishing connectivity to our AS400. So I come back, it comes back with this beautiful interactive screen here, and I go log in again. And it comes back with the main menu. So this is the main menu and into the AS400. And at this point, I navigate through these menus to get to the right application. In our case, what I'll do is, since I want to show you the data which is there on the mainframe, I'll bring up the SQL environment on the mainframe, and it's called, so I'll type in *SQL. So now at this point, I can go ahead and type in SQL syntax to look at any of the information in the tables there. So I'll just go ahead and do a simple select. So I'll do a select star from we have a database called DevCast. So I'll select the name, and the name of the table in this case happens to be products. So I'll just do a select star from products. So the query is running. It has 77 records, and it brings this information back. So as you can see, we have all the various food products we use in our company enterprise, and it gives me all the packet sizes and the supplier IDs and the product IDs for this. Great. I mean, we have the data on the host, but as you can see, first of all, this is not really true client-server computing, because after all, we are still using the CPU cycles on the mainframe. We are also, and we do not really have a very graphical interface to interact with this data. So what I'm going to do now is exit out of this environment and show you how we can better integrate this data into Excel. So as I let me exit out of here because I don't want to leave the session open. I'll log out. And I go back and disconnect this. The first thing is, as I said, we can set up a data source which actually references the DRDA database we just used, but actually appears to be just yet another ODBC data source. So for that, I'll go ahead into my Windows control panel and bring up ODBC setup to just show you how we set up the data source. I have a data source called DevCast DRDA source, and let's just go look at the setup, and I'll bring up the advanced features. As you can see, what I'm using is Microsoft Windows NT SNA Server as the application programmer provider. So what this means is my driver, or the ODBC driver, is going to use APPC libraries provided by the Microsoft Windows NT SNA Server client. And using those APIs, I'll be able to talk to the DRDA database. The only two pieces of information I really need to know about my mainframe is the name of the main, or the LU, or the mainframe which I will use. In this case, it happens to be Olympia, and this mode, which is something I need to set up to be able to do the right connection. So this is all I need to know about the mainframe. So now that we have a data source set up, let me just close this and go into Excel. Let me scroll down to the right sheet. This is the front end we want to build. We want to be able to drill down on the data. We want to be able to see only those products. We want to be able to see products by category so that we can say, hey, these are all the beverages, and these are the quantities in stock. These are the reorder levels. And at the same time, we want the user interface to come back and tell us exactly which products are the products where we don't have enough quantity. And that's something we do by highlighting in red. So this is the rich user interface we want to build, but the data still is on our DRDA database. So now let's go see how can we access that data. What I'm going to do for that is, first of all, I'll change the name of this thing to inventory. And I'll also go ahead and add a module so that we can write our code in there. And I'll change the name of this module to stick with the convention mod inv. And I'll start writing a subroutine called get data. Well, as you can see, there's not much of a subroutine. I just started it and I ended it. What I'm going to do is, instead of I have a couple of choices I can make right now. I can either write direct SQL commands, which will connect to an ODBC data source, run a query, bring the data back, and populate my spreadsheet. Or I can just go ahead and use the Microsoft Query Engine and let it do the job for me. So what I'll do is I'll use Excel's macro recorder the first time through so that I can get exactly the syntax which I need to insert into this. And at that point, I'll have a module which I can later modify to go ahead and run queries dynamically. So let me just scroll down to an empty before doing that, let me set a marker, because when Excel macro recorder records the macro for us, it inserts the macro in a particular location. And to do that, since I want that macro to be inserted here, I'll mark that point, go into my Tools menu, Record menu, and I'll say Mark Position for recording. And having done that, I'll scroll into an empty sheet and start my macro recorder, and I'll say Record out at Mark. At this point, I go down. This is something Randy and Eric, both of them showed you as to how to get at that external data source, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Go down the data menu and say Get External Data. And it comes back and says this is the data source which is available. So I'll just say it's a DevCast DRDA data source. I'll say use that. It comes back with all the tables on the mainframe. As you can see, I have products table and a whole bunch of tables which I really don't know much about, but still these are all the catalog and system catalog tables on the AS400. But the only table I'm interested in is the products one, so I'll just go ahead and add that. I'll close this, and let's go ahead, and it comes back with all the fields available in the table, and I'll select a couple of them. I'll get the category ID. I'll also get the product name, and I'll get the inventory level here. now that we have, for this demonstration, let's just stick to these 3 fields. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and return data to Microsoft Excel. One of the things, it gives me an option of keeping this query so that I can reuse this query again and again within the given sheet by just hitting refresh data. But in our case, since we want to be able to dynamically change the query, we don't want to keep the query definition. And I'll go ahead and say OK, and it's warning me that it's not keeping the query definition, which is OK. So at this point, what it did was it talked to the MS Query, went ahead and talked to the DRDA driver, and went and connected to the mainframe, brought down the relevant data, and populated my sheet here with the relevant data. Still, what I have is, it's basically all we did was a select star from the products table for these 3 fields. So I still don't have the data in the form I wanted in. So let's go down to the module which we started writing. And as you can see, first of all, let me stop my macro so that it does not put in extra fields. So as you can see, it's already inserted code for me, which goes ahead, it does an application run, uses a function which is exported by the Excel query add-in, and does a select. And also, as one of the most important pieces here is the connect string it uses. Since in our case, the data source happens to be DevCast DRDA data source, it provides the relational database name and also other parameters required to make the connection. So let's go clean up a little here, because I did not stop my macro recorder in time, so I have these redundant pieces of code. So I'll just go ahead and cut these. And so now we have, then one other thing we want to do is we want to be able to select by category ID. So what I'll do here is I'll put a where clause and say where cat ID equals beverages. Now that, I just extended the SQL statement which we had. Now having done that, I can go back to another sheet and look at how this macro runs. So let me go to an empty sheet. Instead of, I can always put in a button and tie it in, but what I'll do is I'll go ahead and simply run the macro from here. And our macro was called get data. So I hit run. At this point, what it's doing is it's bringing up MS Query, submitting the revised select statement to the ODBC driver, which in effect then in turn is going to, using Windows NT SNA server, connecting to the database and bringing the data back. So now I have only all the beverages, or the information pertinent to only the beverages, back with me on my spreadsheet. So now if you go back and take a look at the user interface which we wanted to build, all we did was we tied this particular combo box to that module we wrote, which was get access. And we passed in the product or the category ID from within here so that we could get the relevant information to populate this sheet down here. We also added functionality which John Vale showed you to process the order. John Vale showed you how one could add a routing slip to a Word document and automatically route it. And that's exactly what we did beneath the process order button. So in summary, we were able to integrate the data which existed on a mainframe or a host by simply knowing the name of the database, and then after that we were all the time using tools on the Windows environment to be able to make the connection. With that, I'll turn it back to Tom to summarize what we did.
That's great. Thanks very much, Satya. Well, we've made it all the way through 5 of our 6 modules that we're going to be building. We've done an awful lot of things, integrated an incredible amount of technology, from telephony to messaging, to host connectivity, to remote data access, again, SQL servers, local data access, resident in both Access or Excel worksheet files, using Visual Basic for applications to wire these pieces together, and using OLE automation as a fundamental object model that enables all these pieces to talk to each other. What we have now, though, since we've been going for quite a long time, I'm sure that there's some questions out there. Jeff, is this a good time to take some questions?
Sure is. What we're going to do, Tom, is set up the stage a little bit, post the numbers for you to call in, and bring back everybody who's presented so far. So please feel free to get to a phone wherever you are and give us a call, and we'll do the best to answer as many questions as we have time for. Well, welcome back. We're here live to take your questions, and I think we've got our first caller on the line from South Carolina. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Tom?
That's correct, Tom.
How can we help you, Tom?
Jeff, I'm really quite interested in what I've been seeing in the demo so far. First, congratulations on a great presentation.
Thank you.
And really the question comes in the telephony API. You used it a number of times during the demonstration, but I'm really unclear what hardware is necessary in order to utilize those functions.
Okay, the question was what hardware was needed to implement the telephony API, and maybe Kavi, you can talk to us a little bit about that and where to find more information.
Yeah. I used on the hardware side. I used a plain modem, a Hayes modem. In the computer, I didn't really have to install anything. We just used the COM port going out to the modem. And on the software side, we did have to install the TAPI SDK, which is available now, and you can find it on the WinNext forum on CompuServe.
Okay. Good. And we'll also be telling you later, a little bit later on, when we talk about the Microsoft Developer Network, how to get all the latest software development kits, including things like the telephony API. So our next question is Colin from Dublin. Colin, are you there? Colin?
How soon will you have Visual Basic for applications built into Word?
If I understand you correctly, your question is when will Word support Visual Basic for applications?
That's what he said. Yes.
Okay. John, you might want to field that one.
Hi, Colin. That's a great question. We anticipate having VBA, or Visual Basic for Applications, in Word 7.0. So you will see that in the next full incremental version of the product. Right now, you have Word Basic. It's still a very substantive macro language, and you can't get access to it via OLE automation. So it's still a critical component of any Office-based type solution. But Word 7.0 is when we'll see that type of solution or that type of technology in the product. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Our next caller is Werner from Victoria. Werner?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Werner.
Hi. We have a question from the audience. Basically, what they want to know is, of the applications you've shown so far, what is currently shipping and available?
Okay, that's a very good question. Eric, you want to talk about Excel, since that's been the focal point of a lot of this, and then we can talk about the rest of the applications.
Okay. In regard to Excel, we have announced publicly that we're going to be shipping before the end of this year, so that gives us approximately about 2.5 to 3 weeks. And I can say with all the confidence that we will meet that shipping deadline. So look for Excel in the next 2.5 to 3 weeks. As far as the other products,
maybe I'll speak to that, since there's a lot of, well, John, maybe you can tell us about the status for Word.
Word 6.0 is currently available, so you can get it at any retail store at this point. So the product shipped, I believe, at the end of October, so it is a currently available product.
Okay, and I'll talk about some of the other things. We showed Visio Shapeware, which has been shipping for a couple of months. We showed the telephony API SDK, if you will, and that's shipping technology. Windows for Workgroups is what we used for the AtWorks fax work, and that is also shipping. And finally, the only piece of shipping technology other than Excel, the only piece of technology that wasn't shipping other than Excel was that we were using the ODBC driver from Rumba in pre-release form. So everything else other than Excel, which will be shipping in just a few weeks here, is already available in the market. And our next question is from London. Yes, do we have, hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hello, my name is Neil Cunningham. I'm phoning from England.
Hi, Neil.
I have a question on your connectivity to the mainframe. You were just showing direct access to data on an AS400. Now, we're already trying to access data on an IBM mainframe, and I'd be interested to know if it's possible to do that directly rather than going through a logon procedure and then using, as we currently do, a wall data product.
Okay. Do you?
So, if I understand the question right, you were asking me whether you can override these logon procedure and log on directly. Is that correct? In any case, the logon procedure I was going through was because I set up the I set up a database, data source, which was an ODBC data source, and the ODBC data source needed authentication to be able to get at your data on the AS400, and that's something you need. That's something which is native to the platform which has the data.
Okay. Thanks, Satya. Our next call is from Don from Rochester, and I think this one's for Tom about VBA. Don?
Yeah, hi, Tom. My name is Don Race, and I'm located in Rochester, New York. And now that we're a developer using components, creating our own components as a final application for our users, do our users have to have these end products? Is there like a runtime where I can take my final component and just plop it on their machine or their environment and run it without having Excel 5.0 and Word 6?
Today, the way that these applications are primarily constructed is they're built on the full-powered end-user application. And so in most cases, we find that many end users do need, in fact, this collection of productivity applications on their machine anyway. And what we're providing you with VBA is really a way to add a whole new dimension of functionality on top of the productivity apps that your users probably use on a day-to-day basis anyway. And so no, right now we don't have any way to give you a crippled version of any of these applications. Basically, you build on the type of productivity apps that people would use anyway.
Okay, Tom, thanks. Our next call is from Renhart in Manchester, England. Renhart? Renhart? Have we lost Renhart?
We don't have them.
Oh, we missed. Go ahead.
I'm actually calling from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Oh, sorry. I knew we had a site in Manchester, England. Sorry about that.
A bit closer. I'd be very interested to hear how much of the technology we've seen is possible to do on Macintosh and what the timeline is on that.
Okay, maybe Eric, you want to talk, and John, about our Macintosh timeframes?
Okay. Well, in regard to Excel 5 on the Mac, we will have a full implementation of Visual Basic for applications on Mac Excel. Right now, we're looking at the time frame of late Q1 or early Q2 of 1994, sometime around the March-April time frame, to start shipping Excel 5 in the Mac. As far as Word goes?
As far as Word's concerned, we will be shipping in the middle of quarter 2, 1994, towards the end of quarter 2, 1994, and we will also have the same level of support for Visual Basic for applications and Word Basic. We'll also support AppleScript and Apple Events as well.
Okay. One other thing I'd like to add to that is Microsoft is doing the development work for OLE 2.0. So OLE 2.0 will be available on the Macintosh, and that's the core technology that would let us build a cross-platform component solution using the Office objects in Visual Basic for applications. At this point, that's all the time we have for questions right now. We're going to take questions a little later on. Let me tell you a little bit about what's coming up. We have a couple of more pieces of the application to build. One is the business object for currency conversion, and the other is the integration between Excel and Project for budgeting and project planning of a marketing rollout. Then we've got the very exciting launch of Visual C++ 1.5, so you'll see more about how to build business objects, some demonstrations about our developer network CD technology for indexing and searching development information, and then once again the sneak preview at the end of this DevCast on some coming technology our Access Group is. So we're going to take a 15-minute break now, and we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Does your custom Windows application deserve an award? Enter the Windows World Open and you could win an award plus recognition for you and your company. Call the Windows World Open hotline at 1-800-829-4143 for complete rules and an entry kit. Entry deadline is January 24th, 1994, so call today.
In the finance, insurance, real estate category, our finalists are...
The winner is the Prudential.
Wholesale, retail, and distribution, the finalists are...
The winner is Chevron Information Technology.
Government Public Administration. The finalists are...
Winner is Naval Electronic Systems Engineering Activity.
Remember, the deadline is January 24th, 1994, so call today, 1-800-829-4143.
Welcome back. We're now going to go into the second half of DevCast. We've still got a lot of exciting technology to show you. A couple remaining pieces of the Customer Information Workbench application, the launch of Visual C++ 1.5, a demonstration on our Microsoft Developer Network technology, and finally a sneak preview of Access 2. So let me start by talking about the sixth module of the Customer Information Workbench. And let me switch to the slide to summarize what that is. That's the Projects module. That's where we're going to integrate project management information from rolling out our marketing plans into the budgeting application that we've already built in our Customer Information Workbench. What this does is let us combine return on analysis data that we've got from our budgeting process, where maybe we've done a top-down sales forecast, and combine that with the bottom-up cost analysis we've done in our project management system, since it's very natural for a product manager to want to use those two kinds of data together. And to demonstrate how to build the project solution, we brought up Steve Bridgeland from the Microsoft Project Group. Steve?
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff said, my name is Stephen Bridgeland. I am a product manager in the Project Group, and I'm here to show you how Microsoft Project 4.0 can be an integral part of your solution. Let's take a look at what we have right now on the screen. What we're going to be doing is taking the information that Randy did earlier and, with ODBC and brought up into Excel, and then we're going to go with Project and pull the information out of Project 4.0 so that we can do a cost analysis of the two. Let's take a look at the solution on the screen. As you can see here, we have a listing of project files across quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've taken the liberty of putting the name of each file across the top. And then we have an open area for start date, end date, and cost. Underneath it, we have a revenue where I've put some placeholders in here, as well as a % of revenue, which is automatically calculated. So you can see in the chart here, it's going to take the revenue and plot it, and then also do the percent of revenue against that chart. So the first thing I want to do is actually go and get the real revenue from the sheet that Randy was working on earlier. All I have to do there is type in an equals and then go back to the sheet. He was working on sales summary with a pivot table, and I've gone through and actually rolled all of my pivot table information right up so I can see the total revenue. All I have to do is click on that cell and hit enter, and automatically it's entered in for me. If I want to plot all of the rest, I can actually use Excel's autofill feature to just go out and plot all of that information. As you can see, the plot is showing me the revenues, but I don't have the percent of revenue that cost is because, frankly, I don't have the cost yet. So what I want to do is actually go to Microsoft Project 4.0. I'm going to write a Visual Basic for Applications macro that goes out into Project and pulls this information in. Now, Project is a great tool here because not only does it support OLE 2.0, it also supports Visual Basic for Applications. So you can use the exact same syntax if I was writing this in Excel or Project. So let's take a quick look at the macro that I have. The first thing that I did was actually do a lot of typing up front because I'm not a great typist. Now, the first thing I did is set the name and then dimension my obj project as an object and set str file name as a string. I then went through and declared set obj project and created it for Microsoft project.application. I actually have project launched so that you can see here, so I don't have to go through the process of launching it as well. I then am using the for each cell in selection statement within Visual Basic for Applications, because what I'm going to start off with is actually selecting the range of cells that give me the name of each project file. So let me go with for each cell in selection, and then I'm going to build that file name. So you can see str file name, and then I've given it a hard code definition as to where these files are. I could have used pretty much anything. I could have used a variable. I could have put in a dialog box here. And then I'm going to put in the cell value for the name of the project and add the MPP extension so that it can find it. I then am going to send that to the obj project, or Microsoft Project 4.0, with a file open. And then I'm going to use the extension name with this string file name. Now the next thing I want to do is within Excel, I'm going to do a cell offset of 1, so it goes down 1. And I'm going to then establish what the value of that cell is. And that is equal to project.activeProject. And it is the start. So what I'm doing is actually going out into project and saying, in project, take whatever the active project is and give me what the start date is of that. So I actually want to do that for the start, the finish, etc. So let me just select here. I'm going to do a copy and do a paste. And what I want to do is actually go 2 cells down, not 21 cells, and I'm going to do the finish of that as well. You can see I am a great typist here. And I want to go 3 cells down and do the cost of that. So now I've done the offsets here. The next thing I want to do is set obj project file close equal to nothing. No. Have file close and send it the parameter of save, equal to false. That way it's going to close out the file and not ask me any information. I then want to do obj project. Now I then want to do, we'll get this right eventually. I then want to do this for each one of the cells in my selection. So I'm going to set it in the next statement, and then I'm going to set obj project equal to nothing. This will actually free up some resources, so I don't have them closed with defining that object. Now, with all of that set, I'm just going to do an end sub. So I've gone through and pretty much set up this to go out into project and pull that information in, go through each one of these projects and just dump that information in there for me. So let's go back to my sheet. One of the things I should have done right off the bat was actually name the sheet. Let's make that into projects. So I've named the sheet now. Now what I want to do is create a button to invoke the macro. Now I can do that by going to the Forms toolbar and selecting the Create Button icon. And this will just let me draw a quick button on. I can then assign it to a module here and give it a great name. Let's call it Refresh. Now, once I have my selection, I can just click on my refresh, and once again, we're going to go out into Project, pull that information in one at a time. It will also build in the chart as it's going through. So let's just take a look at this. As you can see, it's going out to Project, it put it in, and the chart is being built. So now I have my cost over my revenues, and as you can see in Q1, my percentage of cost over revenue is 136%, which is not very good. But I can see it very graphically and very easily. Well, that's pretty much it for this solution. Back to Tom now for some color commentary. Tom.
Thanks, Steve. We'll try to make this colorful. That was the last of the major modules that we were going to build using our productivity applications and Visual Basic for Applications. Of course, by now, hopefully you have an idea what OLE 2.0 can do for you, providing you a mechanism for controlling one application from another using these tools. Also giving you a good idea of what Microsoft Project 4.0 has in store in terms of being a critical potential component of some of the types of solutions that you might want to build as well. But now, let's talk about some of the business rule objects which we've been using here. Specifically, we've had a currency converter object that we've integrated. Let's talk about some of the requirements for that. What do you think, Jeff?
Sure, Tom. Let me switch to that slide and talk about the currency conversion object. Basically, what our requirements are for a currency conversion object is we've talked about using OLE objects a lot today, but here we want to talk about how you'd build your own corporate business object that encapsulates some very specific data access and business rules. In the case of currency conversion, we may be talking about commission policies for buying and selling currency from one country to another, or some tax policies. And we want all those business rules to be enforced consistently throughout the organization, regardless of who is using that currency conversion object. At the same time, we want to make it very easy for the consumer of that object to glue it into their solution, to hide all that logic so it's enforced consistently, but still can be glued into a solution. And so when the underlying business logic or data access mechanisms need to change in the object, the person who built the solution doesn't need to change their code in any way, shape, or form. And to show you how to build this currency conversion object, we're very pleased to have Scott Randolph from our Visual C++ group. Scott?
Thanks, Jeff. My job here today is to actually build this business object. I'm going to use Visual C++ to build an application which is not only a standalone application, but is also an object that exposes functionality through OLE automation. This business object is going to do our cross-rate currency conversion calculation. And that's just a fancy way of saying we're going to take one currency, calculate it, and convert it to a base currency of US dollars, and then as appropriate, sell that currency and buy the appropriate final currency. The architecture for our business object is shown in this picture here. At the top, we have Microsoft Excel with Visual Basic for Applications drawn in it. Driven from Visual Basic for Applications, going through OLE 2, we talk to the top of our business object through OLE automation with methods and properties to access that business object. The implementation of our business object is implemented in Visual C++. It's written in C++, uses the Microsoft Foundation classes to implement the logic, the business rules for this particular object. Underneath this object, we use the Microsoft Foundation classes database components to talk through ODBC to our database of recent transactions. Those transactions are actually stored in a Microsoft Access database, and we're going to talk to that through our C++ classes. Now, the tool I'm going to use to actually build this object is Visual C++ 1.5, which we are very proud to announce that we are shipping now and is available today. Denis Gilbert will come back a little bit later and talk a little bit more about our very, very nice announcement today. Let me show you some of the tools we have with Visual C++ 1.5 and show you how I can build this business object before your very eyes. What you see on the screen now is the Program Manager group installed by Visual C++. We're providing over 150 megabytes worth of content on CD-ROM here to provide all the tools necessary to develop a Windows application, the entire Windows SDK, the Olay SDK, and all the nifty visual tools to help you build your application. We also include the entire documentation online in a very easy to browse, easy to search mechanism. So let me launch the Visual Workbench. This is the main tool used to develop your application. It is exactly that, a workbench, a place where you hold your tools. It's an integrated source code editor, debugger, browser, as well as a workbench where you can add your own custom tools to. What we're going to do with Visual Workbench is create a brand new application. To do that, we're going to use a tool called AppWizard. AppWizard is designed to make creating applications very easy. And like many other wizards, all we have to do is type in a very small amount of information, in this case the name of the application, tell it where we want to put the new project, and then pick from a list of options. Here's a list of some of the standard options that we support for building MFC applications. We can support multiple document user interface. We can support toolbars, status bars, printing and print preview. We can actually even use VBX custom controls in our application. You might notice I'm turning off all these visual application features because we're really building just a very simple business object. We're going to use the shared distributable DLL version of the Microsoft Foundation classes to build our business object. Well, you've heard a lot about Olay here today. Here's our options for specifying the kind of Olay capabilities you want built into your application. First group here decides the kind of visual editing features you want in your app. Do you want to be a container to embed other visual objects inside of your app? Do you want to be a full-blown server? So when your application gets embedded inside of, say, Microsoft Excel, your application can take over Excel's toolbar and menu bar and actually provide your user interface inside of the Excel user interface. In our case, we just want to be a very simple business object. We don't want to do any visual editing. We do, however, want to support Olay automation. And that's really, really hard here. All I have to do is check this checkbox, and now we have Olay automation in our app. Well, we also want to talk to our database. Our database stores recent currency conversion transactions, and here we are connecting up to an ODBC data source. The underlying database is a Microsoft Access database, but of course, since it goes through ODBC, it could also go to a remote database or a database in any particular file format you want. AppWizard is going to now create the application for us, create a bunch of customizable C++ MFC classes for us, and actually create the new project, registering all the necessary Olay plumbing necessary to create our application and our exposed business object. So here it is. Here's our project. Here's a list of files that were created by our wizard. These are all standard C++ MFC source files. The wizard just creates the infrastructure, the skeleton of this new project, and my job as a programmer is to actually implement the body of the functionality. We can open up a bunch of these generated source files and see some of the features of our editor. You can see some of the syntax highlighting we have. You can see that this is a class created by the wizard that gives us type-safe C++ data members that are bound to the columns in our database. We're going to use these fields to do our currency calculation. I also want to customize this table to make it a parameterized query. And since this is just C++, I can add new member variables and add arbitrary C++ code to customize the functionality of this database class. What I'm doing here is adding a parameter for the country code I want to look for, I want to query for. In this file is the implementation of this C++ class that talks to our database object. A lot of functionality created by the wizard. Once again, I can customize this code. This is standard source code stored in standard text files that developers can examine, learn from, and customize. In our case, adding a parameter field. And we also want to go through the source code and add the extra field necessary to do the query. As you can see, there's lots of code that's created for you as a skeleton for you to hang your code on top of. And all I want to do is just customize that code and add the extra parameterized value. And we're going to look up in our database based on a given country code to do our currency transaction. That's very simple. We can use the visual environment to help us edit and manage our source code and all our projects. What we also want to do is use the visual tools to help us create and maintain our C++ classes. To do that, we have another wizard to help us out to manage our classes. It's called Class Wizard. Class Wizard lets you examine all the classes in your application and browse and edit them in a very structured way. Here's our view. We can look at all the Windows messages that can be handled by this C++ class. We can look at the member variables. For our data set, here are the columns that we've bound to the database. And here's the real exciting part. Here's our Ole automation editor. We use the wizard to create new C++ classes that can expose their functionality through Ole automation. So our job is to build this currency converter object that was used from Microsoft Excel. I'm going to create a new C++ class now and expose that functionality through 2 properties and 1 method. And then I'm actually going to write some C++ code to implement the body of that method. So let's use the wizard to create a brand new class by simply adding a new class, typing in a few pieces of information, like what you want to call the class, the kind of class you want to create. You can create simple classes like we need today that just handle Ole commands. You can also create classes that have full-blown user interface as well. In our case, we just want to make it Ole automation. We also want to expose the type that was used earlier by Randy to talk to this Ole automation object. We called it currency converter. So that's it. The wizard goes off, registers all the necessary stuff, and we now have a full-blown Ole automation capable object that we can talk to through Excel. And we now have nothing in that object. We've exposed no properties and methods yet. So let's go and expose a couple properties and methods. Adding a property couldn't be easier. You click on Add Property, you name the property. For example, we need to specify the country whose currency we want to purchase. That will be a string parameter. Just picking from a list of options, we now have a property. Same thing for the country we want to sell the currency in. We also want that to be a string. We wanted to have more sophisticated properties. We could actually have a function that gets called to get the property value and a different function to get called to set the property value. But we're going to stick with a very simple implementation where the property just gets stored directly as a member variable. So there's our 2 properties. Pretty easy. Let's go a little bit further and add a method. This will be the convert method that was used earlier. It takes a floating point double value and converts it from one currency to another. Once again, by using the wizard, we just add a method, name the method called convert, and pick from a list of options. We want it to return double. We want it to take a parameter that is also a double. Click a few buttons, double click on it, and we're now in the source code editor, editing the actual implementation of this C++ member function. This is the code that's going to get called from that VBA script you saw earlier. Now our job here today is to actually implement this functionality. What we're going to do is we're going to create an object that's going to talk to our database. We're going to query that database, get one conversion rate, adjust our amount by the amount we're going to sell. and then adjust our amount once again by the amount we want to buy. So the algorithm is pretty simple. Let me try and explain this in C++ code for those of you who understand C++ out there. Creating an object of type cconset. This is our database table class. I can customize this table to make it a parameterized query by just specifying one line of code to specify part of an SQL query statement. I don't know a lot about SQL, but all I have to do is write small snippets of the SQL's query statement, and the Microsoft Foundation classes will build those SQL query strings for me. I also want to specify what parameter I want to query on. And then I also want to open up the database. I'm going to open up the database, do a query, and check to make sure I found some records. If I fail to find any records, what I want to do is return an error code. In my case, I'm just going to return -1 to save us a little bit of time. Later on, I'd probably want to throw an MFC exception, which will get turned into a VBA error code. So let me do that. And once I get the return result, what I want to do is adjust the amount by how many dollars I can get by selling this foreign currency. And that's a very simple mathematical calculation of dividing our amount by our conversion rate. And the field's called the number of US dollars you can buy for this given currency. As I mentioned, the currency translation involves two transactions: selling the currency and buying US dollars, but also selling those US dollars and buying the destination currency. And we can very simply cut and paste a little bit of code here and customize this code to do the very similar but reverse transaction. We're going to sell US dollars and buy the appropriate currency. As you probably noticed, this is C++ code. I can write anything I want here in C++ inside the implementation of this function. I'm not limited to any set of functionality. Anything I can do in C++ with the Microsoft Foundation classes and the power of Olay, I can type inside this member function. So let's finish off this member function. Do a few things you can do in C++. Optimize the code. For example, if we find we're opening the database a little too often, we can turn that into a requery. We're going to finally return that amount. And as you probably noticed, that if you sell and buy in the same country, someone's going to be making a commission here. Part of our business rules for currency conversion are that if we're selling and buying the same currency, we probably don't want anyone to make a commission. So the countries are the same. Just an example of kind of C++ code you can write to implement this function. Last but not least, let me go back and finish off some of our C++ features. Yes, we have to continue supporting include files, so we'll include the right header. And we're pretty much done here. Let's start off by compiling our application. Now, we are a compiled language, so we want to compile our program down to a final executable that gets optimized by our compiler. While compiling, I can just minimize the output window, and as the compiler continues running along, I can continue and prepare for my next development task. I can prepare for debugging. I can examine the source code and set breakpoints in preparation for my debugging session. Let's say I want to set a breakpoint here. I can also go and start editing our user interface. A lot of tasks you can do, and since we're providing this multitasking development environment, you can go off and customize your user interface while your compiler is compiling your source code in the background. So I can use our integrated App Studio resource editor to edit the user interface of our form. This is going to be an administrator form for specifying the conversion policy, so it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to lay out a combo box to let people specify the currency policy as well as a field to edit a password. And we do that within our resource editor by just drag and dropping a few controls. Conversion policy, drop in a list box. We can also set a bunch of properties on these objects. For example, whether we want to convert through US dollars as our base, for example, German marks, or we could actually use the better of the two conversion amounts. And in the attendee kit, you'll actually have a simple version of the currency converter object, as well as a more complete version that does the more sophisticated user interface I'm showing here today. But let's go and actually try out our object. Let's not finish the administrator UI and just show you how you can debug our newly built object. So we've finished building our application. Let's run it. As you remember, I've set a breakpoint at one of the lines of C++ source code that's in the implementation of this object. Here's the UI of our app. It's not really done yet, so that's not really too interesting. Since the main feature of this application is it exposes functionality through OLE automation, we're going to have to drive it from another application. That application will be Microsoft Excel. I'm going to bring up a version of the customer workbench that was developed earlier that does the actual currency conversion. So here we are. Let's test out our new functionality here. Change a couple of values. Select what we want to convert, and run our object. At this point, we're running our object, and boom, we stop inside of the debugger. We're actually inside the Visual C++ debugger debugging this business object. But you might say, well, wait a second. That looks a heck of a lot like the source code editor. Well, you're right. That's the whole point. Our integrated environment has the same editor and the same debugger. If you don't believe me that this is a debugger, let me show you some debugging-like features. I can take a look at a variable here and examine its current value. If I want to keep track of that current value, I can add it to a watch window. Just move that, and it'll get tracked as I step through the code. Of course, I can step through the code. I can step over lines of code. I can step into the code, and it'll actually run and show you the source code inside the MFC classes. We provide the Microsoft Foundation classes in both library and source code form, so you can step into them, help you develop and debug your applications, and also learn more and more about the C++ language. So once again, anything you can do in C++, you can do inside this member function with no limits. We can continue executing. You still don't believe me that this is a debugger and not an editor. Let me show you the source code and also show you the assembler code related to this line of code. As you can see, here's the 8086 opcodes. For those of you who love debugging in assembler, we have features for you too. I myself, I prefer debugging at source code level, so we can continue stepping through at a higher level debugging as well. So we continue running our object. Of course, we can go back to Excel, and the new value gets calculated. So there's an example of how we've used our business object. We can use Excel as a front end, and in fact, even test our business object using the Visual C++ development environment debugger driven from a variety of OLE automation clients. That's all I have to show you right now. Back to Tom.
Great. Thanks very much, Scott. Okay, to recap, I think that we're all done building our customer information workbench. Hopefully you've gotten a sense that you can get components from which you can build your custom solutions from a variety of sources. We've shown you components that are based on Microsoft applications, Microsoft Excel, Word, and Project, integrating those, as well as integrating components that may be supplied by third parties who are supplying services through our WOSA API, through ODBC or MAPI or the telephony API. And of course, the Microsoft Foundation classes can also be thought of as a collection of reusable code that gives you easy access to functionality so that it makes it very easy for you to incorporate data access through ODBC, or in this case, as Scott showed you, make it very easy for you to build your own business rule objects that implement the specific policies or the functions that might be specific to your business. So we have all 7 of our modules completed. Our customer information workbench should now be a very nicely productive environment for my marketing and salesperson or my product manager to work at. Everything from tracking day-to-day sales, building budgets on an annual basis and distributing and routing the plans, to automatic creation of reports, integrating with Microsoft Word and then distributing through online or printed formats, communications, having a very nice local Rolodex that will actually dial up the phone or send documents, being able to connect to my mainframe to get access to my enterprise data about inventory or orders that are currently placed, and then finally the ability to integrate my marketing plans and keep my project information easily accessible from this one source as well. So with that, I'd like to ask that Michael Gilbert of Meliora Systems, who's actually the author of this particular solution, come up and talk to you a little bit about what it was like to actually create this application. And I'll be back during the Q&A to talk to you some more. Other than that, thanks very much. It's been a lot of fun, and congratulations, Mike. We think that this is a great solution, and hopefully everybody who's out there watching DevCast will have a chance to look through some of Mike's source code and see how you could use this yourself. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Tom. And thank you, Mike, for joining us here today and all the work you put in building this application. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about Meliora Systems. What does that mean to be a Microsoft solution provider, and more specifically about your background before starting to build this application?
Sure, Jeff. Well, Meliora Systems is a Microsoft solution provider based in Rochester, New York, and we specialize in high-level, general-purpose business and workgroup solutions using Microsoft technology like Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Access, Visual Basic, and now Visual Basic for Applications. And we've been a very active member of the Solution Providers Program and gotten a lot of benefits from that. Myself, it's actually quite ironic because the first Microsoft development tool I learned to use was Microsoft Excel 3.0 with the XLM macro language. Since then, I've been doing more and more work with Visual Basic, and for the last year or so, I've been pretty much living and breathing Microsoft Access.
Okay. Well, how long did it take you to get up to speed with VBA and Ole automation when we asked you to help us out on this project?
It was actually not very difficult to get up to speed on using VBA. It's very much like Visual Basic. They've added a number of extensions to the language which don't change it in a radical way. They simply add incremental functionality. So if you're comfortable with Visual Basic, you're going to be very comfortable with Visual Basic for Applications. As far as the Ole automation goes, it's a very well thought out paradigm and makes using it very simple.
Great, that's great. The one thing I wanted to talk about was that we obviously showed some very simple versions of the modules you built with just a few lines of code so people would understand the basic concepts. Could you talk about a little bit about some of the differences between what we showed and what people will actually see in the diskette in terms of the type of source code that you developed?
Sure. What you're going to see on the disk when you examine the code is a much more robust version of what you've seen today, using a lot of error checking. It's a very well documented code, so it should be very easy to follow. And Visual Basic for Applications is a very advanced environment, but you still need to follow all the methodologies of good design practices and that you would with any other development environment.
That's a very good point, that while we're giving developers much more productivity, that doesn't mean the sound design and development and debugging and testing processes that developers are used to need to go out the window. They're just more productive in those steps.
That's correct.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is what do you think this kind of technology, we've been, obviously as Microsoft, we're very excited about this stuff. Ole automation, the Microsoft Office objects, and Visual Basic for Applications. But we're not an unbiased viewer of this technology. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you think these technologies will mean for your business, and probably more importantly, for your customers who you're providing solutions to.
Right. Well, I think we can expect to see three things from the use of this technology. First of all, from a developer's standpoint, Ole automation and Ole 2.0 are really going to affect the make or buy decision for developers. I think what we're going to see is an expanding market of object providers. And you'll no longer be faced with the process of trying to build complex technology. You'll have it available to you. For example, the scheduling engine in Microsoft Project, or the recalculation engine in Microsoft Excel. That'll be available to you as objects, and I think we'll see more of that. Secondly, for developers, it's going to allow developers to be much more efficient. We have a common macro language across applications that's going to reduce training costs. It's going to increase the ability to shift developers from one development platform to another and make them much more productive. And on the customer's side, it's going to make us as solution providers much more competitive. And what that means to the customer is that they're going to be able to get robust solutions faster and, more importantly, probably these days cheaper.
Great. Well, that's very much what we're trying to do with DevCast. So we very much appreciate all the time you took to build the application and share it with our audience.
Certainly. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, Mike. Well, what we're going to do now is talk more about Visual C++. We're very fortunate to have the head of the Visual C++ business unit, Denis Gilbert, here with us to launch the product on DevCast and show you some more of the OLE features that your applications built with Visual C++ can use. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Denis.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. I'm very, very excited to be here at DevCast today and officially unveiling the newest version of Visual C++ for professional C++ Windows development. In fact, not only are we just unveiling it, but I'm glad to say that the product has shipped. It's in manufacturing. I have one of the first copies off the line here, and there's actually something in the box. I've got the CD with the shrink wrap around it, so this is a product that you are able to order today worldwide. It should be showing up at resellers very soon. This third release of Visual C++ this year, in fact within 10 months, really sums up a great year for Microsoft in terms of providing leading-edge development tools for C++ programmers. This follows on the heels of Visual C++ 1.0 last March, and followed by Visual C++ 32-bit edition in August for Windows NT and Win32s. And this third release is now a replacement for the Visual C++ 1.0 Professional Edition. The Visual C++ product line has done extremely well in terms of reviews, winning awards, and users and customers really like it. We've won many, many first-place awards throughout the year and throughout the world from magazines like XC Magazine, PC Computing, Compute, Database Advisor, and more. And one of the features of Visual C++, which really helped cement its success and its wide use inside the development community, is Microsoft Foundation classes, MFC, which has quickly become the standard C++ API for Windows, to the point where other tools vendors, including other compiler vendors, have licensed MFC inside of their own C++ development products. Symantec Corporation, Whatcom, Metaware, Blue Sky, and there are others in the works. So really it has become the de facto standard C++ API for Windows. Let's have a look at what's in this new release of Visual C++ version 1.5. As I mentioned before, it's a 16-bit development system. It replaces the Professional Edition version 1.0 from earlier this year. And there are really three big features that I'd like everybody to remember when I'm done with this presentation. The first is we've modified the development environment so that you can do your 16-bit development either on Windows 3.1 or on Windows NT. When you combine this Windows NT support with a 32-bit edition, you can now do all your development, 16 and 32-bit, on a single development system, namely Windows NT. In fact, as you'll see later on, we're actually bundling the two products, the 16 and 32-bit editions, so you have a single product with which you can do all your Windows development. Second, as we've mentioned earlier during the DevCast event, we have full integrated OLE 2 support, and I'll explain to you what that means. We've gone out and talked to a lot of users over the last year, and one thing that we've discovered is that 70% of them plan or intend to use OLE 2 or adapt their program for OLE 2 support, but a lot of them are finding that very complex and very challenging, to the point where only about 10% of our customers are actually implementing OLE 2 today. So we've made it extremely easy to take an existing program, add OLE 2 support to it, or add OLE 2 support to a newly created program. We've also added full support for Microsoft's open database connectivity database engine, and we're also including drivers and extensive modifications to the class library in the Wizards to make it really easy to support database programming for C++ programmers. Let's have a look at some of the OLE 2 features which are included inside of Visual C++ and MFC. All of these implementations of OLE, which we've come to accept as being sort of what OLE means. Visual editing, the ability to embed an object inside an application and edit that object in place with that object's menus and toolbars being activated automatically. We support that in Visual C++. We support drag and drop, the ability to move a document or an object not only within its container, but also across applications. We also support OLE automation, which you saw briefly demonstrated earlier. And what that is a very powerful means of taking a C++ function and making that function available to other programs which support OLE automation. In the demonstration earlier, we took a business rule, which was a C++ member function, and used OLE automation to call that business rule from Excel using Visual Basic for applications. That's a very, very powerful concept to be able to expose services from high-performance components, which are in turn linked to databases, using OLE as a plumbing, which puts everything together. And finally, our implementation inside of MFC for OLE 2 support includes encapsulation of the OLE structured storage APIs and full support underneath for the entire OLE component object model. If you're one of the brave few or adventurous few who have started working with OLE, you can find that the technology, although it's very, very powerful and really is bound to replace the Windows API as a standard systems programming model, is also very complex and it can be very hard. The reason for that is the OLEs presented today in the software development kit as a collection of interfaces with monikers and proxies and marshalling and data sinks and class factories, and it's very difficult to relate all of those interfaces to concepts like visual editing and drag and drop and so on. So what we've done to make OLE easy is to provide implementations of visual editing, drag and drop, OLE automation inside of MFC. All accounted for, the new code that we've added to MFC specifically to support OLE and provide those missing implementations amounts to about 20,000 lines of C++ code. And since that code implements those features which everybody wants, you can think of it as 20,000 lines of C++ code that you will never have to write, but which through the class library and the beauty of C++, you can extend and inherit from just automatically. We're also including all the pieces from the OLE 2 software development kit, so you don't need any other pieces to do your OLE development. And we've modified our wizards, as you saw earlier with the OLE automation wizard, to make it really easy to get at those implementations. The dialog box, which you see on this slide, actually makes it possible to create an OLE server object, a container, a hybrid, and add OLE automation simply by checking a radio button inside a single dialog. And I'll show you a little bit more during the demonstration what sorts of visual editing features this single dialog box enables for your C++ programs. In terms of database support, very similar to our OLE support, we include all of the ODBC binaries from the software development kit, the engine itself, the DLL that has the function calls inside that give you basically the ability to access heterogeneous data sources irrespective of the format of the database. We provide a large number of drivers in the product. We provide drivers for DBase, FoxPro, Btrieve, Oracle, Paradox, Access, Excel, text files, a large number of drivers, and the engine and the drivers are freely redistributable with your Visual C++ applications. So there are no runtime fees or royalty considerations to take into account. We include the Microsoft Query Engine, which is shared with Excel 5.0, and we've made a lot of changes to MFC, the new MFC 2.5, to provide both encapsulation of the ODBC API and database classes. The classes look a lot like the Access and VB3 database classes, so if you're already a Microsoft solutions provider or applications developer, the concepts and the classes that are exposed will be very familiar, and you'll be able to get up to speed writing C++ database components and applications very quickly. And as with the OLE support, we've modified our wizards in a couple of ways. One, we made it very easy to bind a table, an ODBC database table, to a class when you create your application. And secondly, we make it possible to bind the member functions inside that class to your user interface. Any Windows control can now be data bound to that C++ class, which is in turn a representation of the underlying database table. And before we look at the pricing information and the availability and so on, I'd like to just take a few minutes and give you a quick demonstration of some of the visual editing features. And you can think of this as a complement to what you saw earlier with the database and the OLE automation support that we had built in. Now, what I have up here on the screen is a visual workbench integrated development environment. And I'm going to bring up that App Wizard dialog box, which you might have seen earlier. Now, what this deceptively simple dialog box makes it possible to add OLE support to any C++ application basically with a single radio button. The container radio button makes it possible to create applications in which you can embed OLE server objects. A mini server is a C++ object which is embeddable using OLE visual editing features inside of some container. A full server is another example of a server which can also be used standalone as well as being embedded inside a container. And finally, we make it possible to create somewhat hybrid applications which can both embed other documents and can be themselves embedded inside of other containers. Microsoft Office applications are superb examples of programs which are both containers and servers. You can embed Excel in Word and Word in Excel, and everything just works. Likewise, to add OLE automation support to the objects you create is simply this checkbox in the same dialog. Now, what I'm going to do is close the workbench and give you an example of just some of the sample programs that come with Visual C++. For those of you who are familiar with Visual C++ 1.0, they might recognize the Scribble tutorial. What this is a simple little freehand drawing program. It's an MDI application. It supports multiple windows and has everything, all the window management built in. It has a toolbar that's fully functional, an about box, a help button and about box. Let me close the help since I don't have help implemented. There's Scribble's about box and so on. So far, nothing new. This is the same familiar freehand drawing program you saw before. Now, the only difference between this Scribble and earlier ones is this one was built as a full server using that same dialog box we just saw a few seconds ago. As a consequence of making that single change, that Scribble program is now an embeddable object for other OLE 2 containers. I've brought up Microsoft Excel 5.0, and what I'm going to do is use its insert object command to pick Scribble from the OLE 2 registry and embed it inside my worksheet. And now I've got that same program with visual editing in place inside a Microsoft Excel worksheet. And in fact, you'll see that I'm even using Scribble's toolbar up here. MFC and Visual C++ 2.5 handle automatically the switching of toolbars and menus depending on what context the server is being used in. I now have Scribble's menus up here as well. Clicking outside the context of my embedded object, I am now back in the spreadsheet and I've got Excel's menus up. In fact, I can move that object around on my spreadsheet, and it is in fact an integral part of my worksheet. So let me bring down Excel, or close Excel rather, and I'll show you an example of a container that you can build with Visual C++. Here is a second sample program from Visual C++ 1.5, and what this is a small object-oriented drawing program. And I can draw objects of various shapes and move them around on my page and so on. Now, the way that this program distinguishes itself is it was built as an OLE container, basically no other change. As a consequence, this program has an insert object command of its own. The implementation of this dialog box and all of the code behind it is provided by the App Wizard and by MFC. You don't have to write the code. You get all of the functionality. Now, I can go down here and I can insert, for example, a Microsoft Graph object. And this is one of the components from Excel 5. And I now have a full-featured graphing custom control inside of my own container. In fact, you'll see that the toolbar has been replaced. I now have the Excel toolbar, the graph toolbar. I've got features like tear off tools and so on. So now I'm using my own application as the user interface and using Microsoft applications as components inside my own container. So let's switch back and have a look at what we've just seen and sort of position this product vis-a-vis what we had before. If you're a professional C++ Windows developer, you can think of the Visual C++ family as consisting of two product lines. One is the Professional Edition 1.5 for all of your 16-bit development needs, and the second is the 32-bit edition released last August for all of your Windows NT and Win32s development needs. As I mentioned earlier, the product is available today. You can order the product, and we have some really exciting upgrades and special offers for our customers out there. Version 1.5 has a special upgrade offer for existing Visual C++ customers. We're going to continue the great pricing we had on 32-bit edition, and you can buy a single product which has both 16 and 32-bit development tools in one box. For local pricing information, consult the handouts which you obtained as part of the DevCast broadcast today. If you can't find the information, contact your local reseller or Microsoft sales office. And we're also continuing the great Chinin 535 double-speed CD-ROM reader bundle where you can get either an external or internal CD-ROM drive with the software at great prices. Now, if there's three things that I'd like everybody to take away today, it's these three things. And if you're going to remember anything about Visual C++ 1.5, this is what I'd like you to remember. First, Microsoft creates great tools for consuming objects. Excel, VB, all of these are great development tools for embedding OLE, for using OLE. But to date, Visual C++ is the only tool to create those objects. So this is not only the shortest path, it's the single path. Finally, it's the first time in history a C++ vendor has incorporated database support in their class library. So C++ programmers, those 50% of you or so who need to support databases, now have a single solution to do so. And we've kept everything compatible from C7 to Visual C++. You recompile to go from MFC 1 to 2. When we went to 32-bit, it was a recompile. When we went to RISC, to the MIPS and Alpha platforms, it was a recompile. And now we're paying off that investment that you made in Microsoft is paying off again. You can get this great database and OLE support by recompiling your MFC app. So this is clearly the safest investment for the future. I'd like to turn the show back over to Jeff for some pretty exciting developments over in the MSDN group. Jeff?
Thanks, Denis. That very much completes our picture of a component-based software development process. We know we've covered a lot of ground today in terms of technical information, and we hope in the program you've gotten a sense of how you can use this technology to build your own powerful business solutions. But we also know you need lots more detailed information to actually build those solutions and access to the latest software development kits and technology from Microsoft. So for that, we're going to bring up our Microsoft Developer Network and talk about what the features that are included in that technology. And for that, I'd like to introduce Richard Tate, who's the Director of the Solutions Strategy Group here at Microsoft. Richard?
Thanks, Jeff. My organization at Microsoft is chartered with delivering information products and events to help you be more efficient at developing solutions based around our technology and products. DevCast is an example of one of the events that we've created to ensure that you have the most timely information possible to integrate into your solutions. What I'd like to spend some time talking about is the Microsoft Developer Network and the enhancements that we're making to that program to ensure that you have the latest information and learn about all of the different topics that you've heard about today. Sometimes it's hard when you leave an event like this to have more information to go back and refer to when you go back to your office. First of all, when we talk about developers, I'd like to mention the key things that we responded to when customers and developers had asked us about their concerns and what we should do with the MSDN program. The first thing was that we had to develop technical and timely information. The information had to be regular, but also, more importantly, had to be very close to the delivery of new technology from Microsoft so that you could integrate that information and skills and techniques into the solutions that you were building internally. In terms of the distribution and availability of that information, then we had to ensure that the format and also the methods that we were using to distribute it was very open, in fact, worldwide, so that everyone had access to that information. And lastly, and sometimes most importantly, is the fact that we had to be able to listen to these enhancements or concerns over time and make sure that the communication methods were bidirectional and two-way. To respond to those concerns, we've been working for about the last 12 months on something called the Microsoft Developer Network. The Microsoft Developer Network is a CD-ROM-based format of over 630 megabytes of information. We're on version 5 of the CD, and we'll release version 6 in January early next year. It's primarily the official way that Microsoft communicates technical information around our operating systems and software development kits. The program is open to developers worldwide, so you can get it in the US or throughout the world, and I'm going to talk about exactly how you get more information later in the presentation. Now, we've also announced an exciting enhancement to that program, which I'm going to talk about, which is level 2. But first of all, let me give you some more detail on level 1 of the CD. Level 1, the one that I just showed to you, contains 2 important components. The first thing is the development library, which is the 630 megabytes of information, but also includes more than 125,000 pages of documentation and over 1,000 sample code examples that you can use within your solutions. The second component of the Level 1 program is a newspaper called the Developer Network News. This is released every 2 months and has a current subscription of over 220,000 people. Those are developers like yourselves who are using that information to create competitive advantage and make their solutions better and get them to market faster. Additionally, there's also offers that are provided within the newspaper on latest technology and products that you can take advantage of. And to just give you a reflection on the quality of our product, then we're recently proud to receive some awards from within the industry, as you can see in the last bullet in this slide. Now, as I mentioned, we recently announced Level 2 of the program. And Level 2 includes some significant additions to the Level 1 program, but importantly builds upon the stuff that I just talked about. It includes software development kits and also device driver kits. And it also has, in the US, some support that's integrated into the product that I'm going to describe to you now. First of all, let's talk about more detail in terms of the type of software development kits and the device driver kits that are included. First of all, it's Windows-related kits. So we include everything from Windows 3.1, Windows NT, both Intel and RISC-based, Windows for Workgroups, and even the PEN and WOSA SDKs that you've heard mentioned by Jeff and the other presenters here today. We also include international versions of our software development kits and DDKs for those of you who are building multi-language applications. And we also have US and select international versions of the operating systems included in the product. So for example, we have the French, German, and Spanish versions of the operating systems included in this multi-CD format that you see here that includes 4 CDs of software development kits, applications, and information. Now, in terms of the support that we've included within that product, then this is US only and currently includes 10 free phone support calls, which are toll-free, and that is available 7/24, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Now, if we take a look at the availability and membership criteria for each of these programs, then as I mentioned, MSDN Level 2 was announced in November. We'll be updating in January. And currently in the US is a subscription fee of $495. The pricing is very consistent throughout the world. We've tried to ensure that that happens in all of the countries that it's available in. In terms of MSDN Level 1, the first CD product that I showed you, then the current membership for that is $195. And we have an upgrade price of $395 from Level 1 to Level 2 here in the US. Again, pricing consistent throughout the world. For more information on either of these two products, I would encourage you to call the telephone numbers that you see on your screen for both US, Canada, Europe, and also anywhere else in the world to get information on the availability and how you purchase either of these two products. Now, there's many benefits in terms of being a member of either of these MSDN programs, but most importantly, I feel, is the fact that this program represents a way for you to establish competitive advantage in developing applications. It gives you a one-stop shopping in terms of information as well as SDKs and DDKs. We truly believe that it will speed up the time to market. The information is available at your fingertips so that you can, if you get into trouble or you're looking for more information on a particular topic, you can browse all of the information that we have internally at Microsoft to try and get the answer to your problems. The support is available every time for you because you have ownership of that CD. It's running on your machines. So you no longer have to be dependent on Microsoft to get an answer on your particular question. Again, we really think that it's going to allow you to develop solutions faster and better solutions given the level of content and information that we have on the disk. But rather than talk more about it, I thought I would go over and give you a demonstration of the MSDN product. Let me just bring it up here. There's basically three windows in the MSDN product. The first window that I'm looking at is the viewer window, and that's going to be a way for you to browse information that's included on the CD-ROM. The second window is the contents window, and that allows you to see a hierarchical view of the information that's currently included on the disk. And lastly, we have a search window, and that is a way for you to browse information and retrieve information, all the stuff that's on the CD-ROM. The first window I want to take a look at is actually the contents window. Now, as I mentioned, there's over 125,000 pages of information on this disk. That would be pretty hard for you to, first of all, get a feel for what's on the disk, and then secondly, for you to be able to browse through it. But let me give you an overview using this tree structure so that you can see the type of information that is included on MSDN Level 1. The first thing I'd like to point you to is the technical articles. And as you can see, there's a variety of information from everything from C++, some of the topics that we've talked about today, to Windows for Pen or Fox Pro or Microsoft Access articles. There's a real breadth of information that's on here that you can browse and take advantage of. I mentioned that there was over 1,000 sample code examples included on the CD-ROM. This is code that's been developed and tested here at Microsoft that you can both learn from and use within your solutions. This includes articles that support and fortify the technical Word articles that I mentioned previously, but also sample code from such things as the Microsoft Systems Journal and also Petzold's Programming Windows 3.1, a very effective way for you to get that information in soft copy. Also included on the CD-ROM are specifications and strategy backgrounders. In terms of specifications, then as you can see here, we have a wealth of everything from common messaging call based around our MAPI technology to video and multimedia information, all the way through to the WOSA specification that's been mentioned a couple of times today during the presentations. I mentioned the fact that we could help reduce your level of support and your dependency on Microsoft for getting support information. On the MSDN disks, we include the knowledge base and all the bug lists that we use internally within Microsoft to respond to customers who call in for information from Microsoft. Again, these are available online to you, and you can browse and get answers to your questions. In terms of books and periodicals, then we're fortunate enough to have, as I mentioned, Petzold's Programming Windows 3.1, but also a new arrival, which is a book written by a gentleman called Craig Brockschmidt called Inside OLE 2, which we believe will be one of the standards used to develop OLE 2 applications. Again, all of these are available to you online. We also have a breadth of product documentation across the suite of Microsoft's products, and also tools and utilities that you can use. And lastly, we even have slides from some of the more popular conferences that Microsoft has put on, for example, TechEd, and also the Windows 32 Professional Developers Conference. So if you were interested in seeing some of the slides from there, then you can see the presentations that were made at that conference. So the first thing I wanted to show you was the contents window and how it can provide a hierarchical way of you looking through and determining which information that you would like to get from the CD-ROM. Now what I'd like to show you is the search window. And the search window is a way for you to go ahead and browse information based on Boolean search criteria. Now, one of the things we've talked a lot about today is OLE automation. Now, what I want to be able to do is search the whole drive, all 630 megabytes of information, and find all of the topics and articles that tell me about OLE automation. So I go ahead and simply click on the Find button. Now what our search engine is doing at this point is actually going and browsing the disk, and it will retrieve articles based on the density of the information in that article. And by density, I mean the number of times that OLE automation is mentioned within that article. So here I have a prioritized list of all of the articles that are available on the disk. Now it found 127 topics. That's still quite a lot for me to browse through. I'd actually like to go ahead and refine my search, so I simply click on this button here. And I'm going to add a Boolean string so that now I'm going to find all of the articles that pertain to OLE automation and Word. So again, I simply click on Find, and we're going to take a look at these 127 topics and refine the result of the search down to OLE automation and Word. Now we can see here that 25 topics have been found. I've narrowed down the search, and now I can go ahead and look at some of the articles that are included. Well, on this disk, we have the Word for Windows 6.0 Developers Kit. It's the most current version of Word and is mentioned a lot during today's presentation. I can see all of the highlighted words here for OLE automation, and I can browse through this information and use the hot word linking capabilities if I want more information on a particular topic. Hopefully what this demonstration has showed you is the fact that we're providing a rich suite of tools for you to get information and to integrate that information into your particular solutions. We do believe that tools like the MSDN tool will provide you with a competitive advantage by allowing you to develop solutions faster and more effectively around the technology and information that's included on this disk, as well as some of the things that have been mentioned in DevCast today. With that, I'd like to turn things back over to Jeff.
Thanks very much, Richard. Thanks for showing us that powerful tool for developers. Well, before we go into our sneak preview of the coming technology our Access Group is working on, we've got time for some more Q&A. So we're going to take another break to reset the stage for a minute or two here, and we encourage you to call in with your questions, and we'll take as many as we have time for. Once again, we brought back our star panel of experts to answer whatever questions you have about the technology we've shown today. And I understand our first caller has a question about Visual Basic and is from London. Do we have a caller from London?
Okay, our first question from London is, will Visual Basic for applications be available to independent software vendors for licensing in third-party applications?
Okay, Tom, you want to take that one on the availability of Visual Basic for applications to third parties?
Sure. I have to tell you, we've really had our hands full just trying to get the first version of Visual Basic for applications completed. We've had a lot of people ask about this, and right now we're just in the final stages of completing our first version. It's something that may very well be a good thing for us to do, and we'll probably start thinking about more seriously after this first version ships. But to be honest with you, right now we don't have a plan to do licensing, although it's something that we are open to considering.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. I understand our next caller is from the Netherlands. Are you there?
Yes, we are.
Okay, what's your question?
I have a question on the Visual Basic things that are included. Can they be locked from viewing and altering by the end user?
I think the question was, can the Visual Basic modules we've shown or you develop yourself be locked so the end user can't see the source code or modify it, for example? And Eric, maybe you can handle that one.
The answer is yes. You can hide Visual Basic sheets and you can password protect them so that your end users who are using your applications will never be able to access them and never be able to see the code or make any changes to it. So definitely yes.
And that's something that's very attractive for solution providers or third parties who are going to build add-ins and don't want their customers to be able to get at the source code. Do we have another caller on the line?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I'm Eric in Westminster, and I'd like to know, does Visual C++ 1.5 work under OS2 2.1?
I guess that's a question for Scott on the availability, the potential for Visual C++ to run under OS2.
As far as running some of the command line tools, yes, we are. Some of the command line tools do run. As far as the visual environment, that's not something we really test a lot because, of course, we want people developing under Windows and Windows NT.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Do we have another question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, this is, I'm calling from Los Angeles, California.
I have a question regarding the difference, or what differences is there between MSDN and TechNet?
Okay, maybe I can handle that one. The question was the differences between MSDN, the Microsoft Developer Network, and TechNet. It's basically the target audience for those subscription services and the type of information that are on those diskettes. MSDN is targeted at developers, and we take all the information that Richard showed you that my developer might be interested in, sample code, software development kit references, littered product manuals for our development tools, so anything a developer would be interested in. TechNet's target is more support professionals and system integrators, so things like our Windows resource kits, bug fixes from our product support group, knowledge base on how to handle complex network integration problems. So they're traditionally targeted at two separate audiences. Now in many companies, the same person may do both jobs and may want access to both. But by and large, we found they're very discrete audiences of support professionals and integrators and software developers. Do we have any other questions? Do we have another caller on the line? Okay, I'm getting signaled that that's all the time we have for questions. What we're going to do is take one last break to reset the stage here and show you a sneak preview of the access technology we're working on. See you in a minute. Preview of the access technology we've been promising you. And for that, we brought John Betts, who's a product manager in the access group, up to demonstrate some of the technology they're working on. John?
Well, thanks very much, Jeff. My name is John Betts. I'm a product manager with the Microsoft Access team. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to join you today and show you a bit of the technology we're working on for the next release of Microsoft Access. We've been doing some exciting work implementing some of the technology you've seen today, and I want to cover several of those areas today. The current version of Microsoft Access, version 1.1, has held a wide appeal with many different types of database users, all the way from end users through developers. Lots of folks have been using Access. Specifically, developers have been using Access to rapidly develop applications, and there's in fact a whole host of applications already out there built around Access. We've learned a lot from talking with these folks as far as what areas we should work on for the next release, and we want to show you several of those areas today. So specifically, we'll be showing those technologies in the context of a human resources application that you see on the screen here. What we have is we're tracking job candidates. You see some vital information in the block of text here. We also have other pieces of information, resume, comments on this candidate, and details for the candidate. So the first thing developers really told us that they wanted to be able to do is have a fine degree of control over their application when it's running. This takes the form of being able to set many of the properties of this form at runtime. This ranges from the obvious, changing the properties of each field as I enter them to denote where the user is in the application, but also to the more innovative. You see at the bottom of the screen we have a subform. Our option group here is actually binding the control source of that subform as I select each option. You can see that I have detailed information, I have some resume information, as well as some comments based on interviews that this candidate has been through. So you can see through this control that the developers have, they're able to really deliver the application and the information they want while keeping the screen very clean.
That was pretty powerful. When you switch between the different contents of the subform, was there a lot of code involved there?
Actually, interestingly enough, there wasn't a lot of code. There was only one line of code for each group, or each option in our option group, basically setting the control source for that subform. And because Access is a database product, I didn't have to worry about synchronizing the job candidate with the details in that subform. Access did that work for me.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. What else can you show us, John?
Well, one of the other things developers told us they wanted to be able to do is use the right tool in the right place for the application. In this application, we have a resume on the screen, and we want to be able to provide the user the ability to edit this, and we see that it's rich information, rich text information. So using the technology of OLE 2.0 called visual editing, as a user, if I double click on that, you can see that Word for Windows menus have been integrated with Access menus, and I'm presented with the standard formatting toolbars. So I'm actually now working in Microsoft Word for Windows 6.0, and I can use all the text formatting capability that gives me. So I can format some text, and then when I leave that container, that subform, I'm back where I was in the application. You can see this is a very powerful way where we empower users in the context of the application.
It's a great example of some of the end user side of the way you take advantage of OLE 2.0 for end users. Do you do anything for developers? Some of the things we showed today with OLE automation supported in other Microsoft products?
We certainly do. OLE 2 automation is a great technology to use to drive other applications, as you've seen today. In the context of our HR application, we have a candidate that we have on the screen, and we want to go ahead and send him a letter extending an offer, for example. So you can see on the screen I have selected the offer letter type, and I have a Microsoft Word for Windows icon button here that's going to build that letter. Let me reduce the size of Access so we can see Word acting in the background when I select that button. So I'll push the button, and you can see that Access is driving Word for Windows in the background that creates that letter, but it also even created an envelope for me. In this way, using OLE 2.0 automation, I can drive other applications from within Access.
How do you actually do that? I mean, how does that compare to what we've seen with VBA, for example, where we dimension a variable as an object and use its properties and methods to control it? Is it fairly similar?
Indeed, it compares quite favorably with what you've seen today with the OLE 2 automation code. And in fact, if I switch to design mode on this form, we can view the event procedure behind that button, and you'll see that it's standard code that you've seen today. We basically set a Word object and create a Word basic object, and then I just manipulate that object's properties or methods to build the letter in the background. In fact, I can take this code, cut it out, and reuse it in Excel, for example. This concept of reusable code is quite powerful, and it really saves the developers a bunch of development time.
That's terrific. Is there anything else in terms of developer features that we can persuade you to show us today?
You bet. One of the things that was very powerful in version 1.1 of Access was the metaphor of wizards. Wizards is a technology to really empower end users to get their database tasks done without necessarily knowing all the details. In the next version, we're working to extend that metaphor to the developers, and one of the things developers told us that it takes them a lot of time to do is automate a form, for example. This typically is in the form of a command button. So what I'll do here, I'm in design mode. I'm going to add a button to the screen, and you'll see I select my button from the toolbar, and I'll drop it onto our form. At this point, Access has stepped in the form of a button wizard to help me complete the task of adding a button to the screen. You can see I can do common things as far as record navigation, record operations. In this case, I want to launch an application, so I'll choose Application Run Application and choose Next. Now I want to point at the executable. This happens to be a Visual Basic 3.0 executable. And then I'm then able to control what button face I use, and I'll add my own picture to that button, and I'll say I'm finished. So you can see that I've really delegated the complex task of building the event procedure there to the computer. I don't have to worry about any error coding. That's all done for me.
Great. Well, can we go for it? Can we try it out?
Let's do it. Let's switch back to form view, and I'll select this button. Let me explain what this is going to do. In the context of this application, we have on the screen, you see some interview results that are basically ratings. And what I have done with Visual Basic 3.0 and the eForm technology is built an eForm that will go out through mail and allow me to capture the interview results and bring them back into Access and update my database. You can see that using Visual Basic 3.0 and Access together, I've created a great workgroup solution, and in fact, Microsoft has a great family of database application development tools that work quite well together.
That's a good point, John. Can I persuade you to show just one more feature, maybe something on the database engine, the core database technology that Access is going to have?
I'd be happy to, Jeff. We've seen a lot of the ways we're extending the programmability of Access, and I want to go ahead and show you just one area that we're very excited about that relates to the database engine. Specifically, what we've done or working to do is extend the referential integrity model in the form of cascading updates and deletes. What this really means is I'm able to set rules at the database engine level that will ensure that I don't orphan any records when, for example, I delete a record. In the context of this application, if I went ahead and deleted this candidate after you say he's accepted a job, I want to be able to delete all the related information, such as his audition and his resume, clean it out of my system. So to illustrate this, I have a macro here that's going to set up the screen to view the information that is contained in our HR application. And let me go ahead and sort this so you can see what's going on. So the first table here on the left is the job candidates table. It contains just the basic vital information for the first candidate, B.B. King. You can see in the next table, auditions, I have several rows of information that contains the audition information. And then the last table here, you see I have several rows that contain some interview results. So now when I select this record and I go ahead and delete it, Access tells me I've deleted one record. I'm going to delete some additional records. I'll choose OK. And now when I move over here, you can see that actually all these records have been deleted. You can see that this would really save developers a bunch of time in terms of allowing for this programmatically. I no longer have to write the several hundred lines of code to ensure I don't orphan any records when I delete something. So we're very excited about this capability we're adding to the engine, and we look forward to coming back for the next DevCast at Tech Ed and showing you more.
Great. Thanks, John. As you know from Tom's experience, you are very much on the hot seat that March 30th. You need to be back showing us more technology that the Access Group's working on.
We certainly will be. We're excited to do it.
Okay, thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Well, let me wrap up with just a couple of key points on what we tried to accomplish today. We tried to show you how to build better, higher quality solutions faster than you've ever been able to before. And the key ways we tried to show you this is through object linking and embedding 2.0. The way we can leverage the momentum of Windows for an industry standard object model that gives you a wide collection of programmable objects. As Tom talked about, the Microsoft Office essentially gives you 10 million lines of code of Microsoft exposed objects for you to use in your custom solution. We've also talked extensively about the Windows Open Services architecture and how you can use that to build enterprise services such as database access and messaging into your applications. We've shown you some of the potential of Visual Basic for applications as finally Microsoft delivering on our promise of a common professional development environment incorporated into our applications. And then we showed you the premiere of Visual C++ 1.5 as the ideal way to build business components and build OLE 2 enabled applications. We also saw some information on the Microsoft Developer Network and what a tremendous asset that can be to you in your own development projects. So let me also once again call for your feedback. The way we can continue to do a better and better job of meeting developer needs is for you to give us very clear and explicit feedback on how to use programs like DevCast to get information out to you, what kind of features you'd like to see in our tools. And on the slide, we summarize a number of the ways where you can give us feedback directly regarding this event. And specifically for those of you who want more information on the videotapes or want to see videos of previous DevCasts, we'll show the number up on the screen there. You can order both a short version and a complete version of this DevCast and previous DevCasts, as well as copies of all the handouts, the attendee discs, and so forth. So with that, that ends this DevCast, DevCast 3.0. We'll be very excited to see you all again for DevCast 4 on March 30th, live from Tech Ed. Thanks for coming.